Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Jim Cornette Experience, where we're living on the edge of a lightning bolt, baby. Because there's so many of you out there listening to me, I have no idea how I'm possibly going to be entertaining enough to justify it. Today, I will, however, accept someone's apology, and then I will say a bunch of other stuff that many people will be very sorry that I said. And we'll talk about what they're calling wrestling these days. To join me here now, Hawaiian Brian, the podcasting lion, the king of the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network, Mr. Co-host to you, and he is the Arcadian Vanguard candidate for President of the United States in 2024, the great Brian Last.
Aloha, Jim. A pleasure to be here once again. I didn't know I was running for president, but with your endorsement, I think I can go all the way.
Well, I'm sure you can go all the way, much like Penelope Pit Stop. No,
stop it. Come on.
We
just opened the show. What are you doing?
But no, when you start speaking now after the drive-through episode this past week, where you just basically gave the Mr. Smith Goes to Washington speech, you just stood up. They even retweeted it, Brian, with, as I suggested on the program when it was over, the Battle Hymn of the Republic playing in the background. I'm sure you saw that modification.
I did.
It was a very forceful speech, a powerful speech, a command of the English language and the power of truthiness that is seldom displayed. I commend you, sir. You got a lot of kudos for that.
Well, thank you. My whole point was, if I can, since you brought it up.
Well, since I just broached the subject.
Two things I want to say. One is, my whole point was, for everyone who, let's say, is in AEW or a major fan of AEW who constantly says or tries to cancel Jim Cornette, just be true to your boo. If you're going to boo on him, look at everyone else right in front of your face. Look at all the people who have said horrible things and done horrible things and support horrible things and have stood by and let horrible things happen and said nothing. Just be true. You know, Jim speaks his mind. A lot of other people only do that when they're off air. That's the first thing I'll say. The second thing is, just want to point this out because it did surprise me that so many people missed the point, although it shouldn't have. Early on, when I was talking about the hypocrisy here of Rusev and Penelope and Pip having such an amazing problem with you for using the word slutty or alluding to Penelope being a slut, I pointed out, be mad at Chris Jericho for donating money, as I put it, to a man who has been credibly accused by a couple dozen women of everything from molestation up to rape. Some of the comments I saw were, well, how come you didn't call out Joe Biden? How come you didn't call out Andrew Cuomo? I just want to say, without even getting into the politics of Republican versus Democrat, if that's what your comment is, you're missing the point. The reason I didn't say anything about Andrew Cuomo was Chris Jericho didn't donate money to Andrew Cuomo. If there was a wrestler in AEW who we knew publicly, because the records were released, had donated money to Andrew Cuomo, despite him being a Democrat, I probably would have brought that up in that moment. Unfortunately, we don't know about the political donations of a ton of wrestlers. We do know about the Jericho household. And we do know about the credible accusations, like I said, molestation up to rape. 24 women. It's being argued in the courts right now of Donald Trump. It wasn't about Republican versus Democrat. It was about facts. So that's all I wanted to say.
Well, thank you for speaking up, Brian. And also, I'm not even going to go into Andrew Cuomo, but good God. When I first heard about all this, I'm like, oh my God, him too. He's Cosby'd somebody. Or he's done what is the current scorecard that he is a man who has been rude in hitting on several women? I haven't heard of any forcible detention, molestation, penetration, any of these Asians. Just that he was rude and should apologize. Has he drugged anyone or taken anyone in the back room against their will, or he brought people to his hotel room, I understand, to help work his cell phone, and then awkwardly made inappropriate comments, and then they got offended and left. Have I missed something?
The story is still playing out. A lot of it seems to be... Well, it is
like, if there's more to come, then I'm open.
A lot of it seems to be that it appears he was hitting on people. He won't admit that, but it appears he was, at a minimum, hitting on people, and it creeped them out a little bit. And then, I guess, one of the things I read was he made eye contact with me like he wanted me, but then they put a picture...
Wait, what?
I saw this, and then someone put a picture of him talking to, I think she was a reporter, talking to her, like, here's the evidence. And I'm like, he's looking at her like he's listening to her. But I don't know. We don't know. I mean, there's a lot of women. After like 5 women, then you kind of like sit back and go, well,
but they have all said, yeah, he's hitting. So was he single at the time? Is he a married man? I don't know anything about his personal life.
He's divorced. He was married to a Kennedy, and then he was dating, I think her name was Sandra Lee or something. She's like a TV chef, or I don't even know exactly. But I don't know if he was with her or not. He's single now, I believe.
Middle-aged single guy says inappropriate things and trying to hit on woman. And what else? Otherwise, we've covered approximately 349 million of the 350 million people in the United States. Well, at least the half of them that are men.
I mean, that's true. I mean, there is a difference between, despite an age difference or how awkward it makes someone feel, there's a difference between hitting on someone and just pulling your pecker out in a movie theater and saying, what are we going to do about this? I mean, there's a difference.
Wait a minute. Are you speaking from experience?
I'm not.
Who did that?
Just using an example of different things that could potentially happen.
Oddly specific example of something that you might do that later on you might want to apologize for.
I've never done it. I actually find movie theaters disgusting, and I try to avoid them.
Those kind of theaters.
No, any kind of theater.
Okay. I see what you say. Well,
when I was growing up,
going to the movies with Pee Wee Herman.
One of my family's neighbors was this guy, Cy Frank, and his partner was another family friend, Sid Sinitar. They actually, I guess, would best be known. They wouldn't be known by anyone, but they would best be known because they bought the rights to the movie Groove Tube, which was like the first movie with Chevy Chase and everything.
The Groove Tube is the greatest comedy movie in the history of comedy movies.
Yeah, so they owned it. They bought the rights to it, but they owned a bunch of movie theaters. Like they owned a few in Long Island. They had one in the West End, I believe, of Long Beach, where I grew up. And then they had ones in Manhattan. And the famous story, I don't know why what you just said made me think of this, and I don't know if anyone would care, but when Deep Throat came out, and that was like the big sensation. That was like a pornographic movie that crossed over to just curious audiences. They
were making jokes that Johnny Carson was talking about it in his monologue. It was a big cultural thing, yes.
They obviously made a lot of money, and one day they're outside of one of their theaters in Manhattan talking about whatever, and they see the Cantor Botten from Temple Emmanuel in Long Beach come out of Deep Throat. But yeah, that's my, I don't know how I got here, but that's my story.
How did we go? Oh, well, remorsefulness, regrets. I've had a few, but then again, too few to mention. Apologies we were talking about. And I have decided here on the program in public, if you will, to be, I may not be the best man, but I'm the better man. I'm going to be exhibit magnanimous behavior, and I'm going to be a paragon of magnanimity, and I'm going to accept Miro's apology.
I must have missed some. Did he apologize? I saw that he pulled down tweets. I didn't see that he added any to.
Well, Brian, you just, it's all semantics here. You're not understanding the meaning of all of this, because you see what happened. And of course, for those of you who tuned into the drive-through, the podcast this past week, or who listened to the clip on YouTube, because I think between the YouTube and the podcast, about as many people heard me speak about Miro's tweet, about half as many, at least, as watches their whole television program on Wednesday nights on TNT. But nevertheless, I mentioned that Miro had tweeted in a fit of pique concerning one of our reviews of their attempted performances that he threatened me with some type of we were not sure what category this assault would fall into, because his words were, "I will come on you like God's wrath." So we weren't sure whether that was a threat of physical or some weirdly sexual type of threat. And so we responded to that, obviously. And later on, we have come to find out that Miro deleted that original tweet that we were referencing. Now, Brian, what happens when you delete? So why do you delete something? I sound like Don Knotts, the ghost of Mr. Chicken. Who is deleting something? Why is deleting something? Let me clarify this. Why do you take something back, Brian? Because you're sorry that you said it, because you regret saying that or doing that. That's why you take things back or delete things, because you regret doing them with the benefit of hindsight. And when you, for example, send your regrets for an invitation, and you send your regrets that you cannot attend, I'm sorry that I will not be able. So I'm sorry is an apology. So when Bluto deleted and took back and regretted and was sorry, then he is apologizing. So by the act of deleting the tweet, he has apologized to me, and I accept it. Now, see there, why can't we all be big, good-hearted people like that?
I don't know if that's the way it works. I will say there is a rumor, I don't know how true it is or not, but it is a rumor that, let's just say, certain AEW talents have been asked/ordered to not engage with Jim Cornette on social media.
Well, no, come on now. It's a free country. Everybody gets to do, wow, what in the world, what kind of fascist regime would that be if the administration, the corporation, the big honchos up top were controlling the minions' social media? Well, that would be almost like a big publicly traded corporation or something.
The one he did leave up was, "Answer me, Mark."
Well, see, that is my middle name for real. So anyway, but I appreciate it, and I will accept Bluto's apology. And I also want to thank him. And see, why there's love in the air. There's love in the air, Brian, this week. It's all going to be sunshine, lollipops, rainbows, and waterfalls. We're just as shickle titless to be here as possible, and happy and giggling like schoolgirls with shiny new vibrators. That I want to thank Bluto for the smashing success reopening of the Cornette's Collectible Store at JimCornette.com. Last weekend, we opened up on Sunday the 14th, and we're overwhelmed pretty quickly. If you were in the first 36 hours, Sunday through, say, Tuesday morning, your stuff is in the mail. And Tuesday, March 14th on through Thursday, March 16th, I hope to get out by this coming Wednesday, because we are slammed, and I'm in a 7 to 9 day turnaround right now. However, things are about to change. Drum roll, please. No, that's not an edit. Don't take us off the air. Drum roll, please. Brian. That's enough. That's enough rolling.
Yeah, I'm hurting my hands here.
You're not goddamn
Buddy Rich.
Buddy Rich. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We found the boat. We have found the boat, folks. The boat has landed. It didn't capsize, and it didn't run aground. It actually landed where it was supposed to. I just got the call late yesterday from Figures Toy Company, and the action figures will be available. They are in the United States and are on their way to me now, and will be here early this week at Castle Cornette, and they will go on sale, at JimCornette.com next Friday, March 26th of 2021. The original red and yellow design and the red and green Christmas variant that we only had 400 of all last year. This is the last run of both of these designs. And when these are gone, they're gone for good. We're going in a different direction, and these are all I'm going to be able to get for the calendar year 2021. So, without trying to tell you the incredible value and high quality of these products that I have for sale at JimCornette.com, let me make a plea to you. I'm already backing up because I was closed for 2.5 months. I starved you guys. I know it's my fault. Bad, Jim. But I'm already backed up, and starting next Friday, the sales by history's example will probably be brisk. So when you order, please allow 2 to 3 weeks minimum for your order from the time you place it till it arrives to you. 2 to 3 weeks minimum, and I'll keep you posted here if that changes and gets worse, because every item is signed and shipped personally with love. So send me some love back, and don't email me 6 days after you order saying, "Where's my shit, Jim?" Because I'm going to... Brian, I don't have as much hair in my head as I used to, and I'm afraid I'm going to lose some in the next month or so. And Stacy's back surgery is scheduled for April 5th, and it's not like we're going to change that. When the figures didn't come in, I thought, oh, they're lost, and this is, the heat's off. But no, everything's happening. So... Anyway, order quickly. Well, don't order quickly because they're not up yet. But the store is up and available now. If you want something else besides a figure, get it in. I'm going to fill all that stuff before next Friday, or before I start next Friday. And Friday, March 26th, the figures will be on sale while they last. And we already had advertised another cameo on sale because we didn't think figures were coming in, but we are going to honor that because that's tomorrow, Sunday, March 21st at noon Eastern time. We're going to put another 50 cameos on sale at Cameo, Cameo, cameo.com/Jim Cornette. And I'm going to fill those on Thursday right before we put the figures on sale. And as I mentioned, since the figures are going to be on sale and we got to record these shows a couple days a week, and Stacy's surgery is the first part of April, these are going to be the last cameos that go on sale. I can't see how I'm going to be able to do this before another month or so. So probably the last ones until the end of April, first part of May. Did I get it? And just please, everybody, I'm only one man, and I can only trend so many times. I'm very trendy, Brian.
You are? You should start playing video games. You'll be even more trendy.
Oh, good Lord. I'm getting good at Dennis Corluzzo's Kiss pinball machine again.
Oh,
now I'm starting to get the old fingers back. Why, we can, that's what we ought to do. We ought to get old Blue Toe and Pip and the Virgin Penelope Pit Stop in a 3-on-1 handicap match with me, with the ring entirely surrounded by 1978 Bally Kiss pinball machines. And then I'd be an expert and I could just completely overwhelm them all.
I challenge you to a game of Tetris.
Oh, boy, I tell you what, I wish he'd come at me with that Tetris machine. Boy, I'd be ducking, dodging, moving, grooving. All right, anyway. Before we talk about anything fun or wrestling, either one, because wrestling usually ain't fun, these days, I wanted to mention this to you, and I did briefly before we went on the air, as they say, but we didn't talk about it. But everybody, I say everybody, most people, at least in this country, have heard about the guy with the shooting at the Atlanta massage parlors. And it's brought to light the more broad anti-Asian hate crimes that have been on the rise, and now it's getting a lot of the news. But first of all, before we even delve into the specifics of this, what kind of fucking idiot do you have to be to blame some Chinese guy in Des Moines because somebody in fucking China that he's never met, has probably never been to, ate the bat that chased the rat that fucking gave the COVID to whatever the fuck. What is it? That's like wanting to beat the shit out of me because Mitch McConnell is our senator. It's not my fucking fault. I didn't have anything to do with it. I was trying to fucking stop it. So just because of particular disease that we're being overridden with on this planet because we won't stop fucking with nature, originates in a specific place, why are we mad at everybody, even if they've never been there, just because their ancestors have been there or they look like somebody that might once have gone there? What the fuck sense does that make? If you can bring me the specific bat eater, whether he's Chinese, Mongolian, or fucking from Cleveland, that was in China that ate the bat that gave the COVID to everybody or whatever, then I will be happy to stand in line to slap him around the head and face. But it's fucking ridiculous. Are they that stupid to think that, okay, they've got to be fucking sick because they're Chinese? And like they'd have COVID after a fucking year anyway, just walking around with permanent COVID. But is it they're that stupid, or does it just cover up that they just don't want to like fucking Asian people to begin with?
I think it's mass ignorance, but I also think it didn't help when you had the president calling it the China virus for so long. He was the only one. He was the one trying to really push that to be the name of it. And I think, like I said, when you have ignorant followers and they hear that, and by the way, it's not just Chinese people. I have friends here in the greater New York area who are Japanese and Filipino, and they've been posting on social media their concerns about this because it's been happening a lot lately. And it's not just people of Chinese descent, it's people of Asian descent.
Well, that's the people who, and like you said, Trump saying China virus. Well, it's still okay. Then the stretch still becomes why be mad at the Chinese people in China, but don't be mad at the Chinese people in fucking Houston. But if you're going to be, at least have some limits to your stupidity. But people who believe that shit to begin with generally can't tell the difference between whether somebody's from China or wherever the fuck, because they're blithering simpletons. However, in this case, and I mean, this is not bad that they're bringing to light that there's been more anti-Asian crime or hate or violence or sentiment or whatever. But in this case, it's a stretch because the people that this fucking idiot shot just happened to be mostly Asian, because that's what this guy, he claimed he was a sex addict, and the only sex that he was addicted to apparently was not having any unless he paid for it. And if you're 21 years old and you can't get laid except you pay for it, fuck you. You're a fucking loser, right? And he was pissed about it. And he went and shot a bunch of the fucking girls and or people who got in the way of him doing that because he's a goddamn lunatic. And then I like that they put all kinds of heat on the on the cop who said, I'm going to paraphrase now, but the clip was out there on the news, so people will know what I'm talking about. We said, well, he just felt bad. And he was having a really bad day, and this is what he decided to do. Whereas they're like that cop in Georgia, if it was a fucking Black Lives Matter or somebody looked like Lil Wayne that they'd taken in, they'd be fucking, this motherfucker piece of shit cussed him, blah, blah, blah. The point is, you shouldn't be mad at fucking Asian people who've never been to China for a virus that started in China, just like you shouldn't be mad at people who've never been to Spain, even though they're Spanish or Hispanic, for the Spanish flu, which, by the way, come to find out, didn't actually start in Spain. That was just the easiest name they came up with. And this guy was another one of these fucking lunatics that is so goddamn distraught about his loser life that he decides he has to make it's somebody else's fault. He said it was they were teasing me. I'm a sex addict. They were teasing me. Fuck you. He's got to have an excuse. He's got to blame somebody else because he's fucked up. But here is my point. They're making this now. Oh, this is a goddamn outrage because it's anti-Asian. It should be a hate crime. Imagine that. It should be a hate crime for you to go and shoot a bunch of people. Like, we have to debate on whether to qualify. He shot 8 people. Should this be a hate crime? Brian, what do the anti-Asian shootings, the anti-gay shootings, and the school shootings of little school kids, what do they all have in common?
Guns.
The fucking guns! It's not hard to figure out. If you wouldn't let these men, whether they're goddamn mad at Asian people or mad at massage girls or mad at anybody, if they didn't have the fucking guns, if they couldn't get the fucking guns, if it wasn't so easy to get so many guns, and the goddamn people who tried to take over the fucking United States government for a shoot in January weren't stockpiling all these guns and making sure that every knucklehead and lunatic and mentally bankrupt moron in the world could get a fucking gun as easily as possible, then maybe we wouldn't have to call attention to all this anti-somebody hate crime. The cops don't even shoot black people in England. You know why? Because most of the cops don't have guns. You know why? Because the people don't either. So I would say we could solve everything and nobody'd get shot if you just took the guns away from the stupid people in the United States, which is a large majority of them, which means drastically reduce the number of guns in this country and the people allowed to have them. The common sense thing to do that nobody ever does, even when school children and nursery school kids are slaughtered in a fucking classroom and their blood and brains are splattered all over the fucking windows and the goddamn desks, and their parents are obviously upset. And the politicians get upset. Nobody does anything because it's America. And we're a bunch of stupid fucking people that don't recognize our drastic errors. But you still wouldn't shoot. You wouldn't solve all the problems if you took most of the guns away from most of the people, because the cops still have to have guns. Because some of these people, it's going to be 100 years before we get rid of all the guns in this country. So the black people are still going to keep getting shot because the cops have guns, but maybe not so much, because if there were less guns, the cops would be less likely to think they were going to get shot. And now we got more video cameras to keep an eye on them. So it would reduce most shootings of most groups across the board if we just smartened up and got rid of most of the guns. I don't know. What do you think? Is there another way to do this?
I don't know.
Speechless.
I'm speechless right now, yes. Let me just add that too.
Put us right back on YouTube. Let me ask you this. Who's going in the Hall of Fame? I just heard about Eazy-E going in the Hall of Fame. This is big news. People were saying the guy who tried to put them out of business, and now they're putting him in the Hall of Fame.
That's right. Just announced this past week he will be one of the class of 2021 into the Hall of Fame, the WWE Hall of Fame to specify.
And here's the thing: why they are putting him in the Hall of Fame in for one aspect, to call attention to the fact that he failed in putting them out of business, aren't they? Isn't that another way to look at it?
Well, to the victor go the spoils, yes.
And boy, is Eric spoiled. But no, in all seriousness, besides the fact, I believe Eric Bischoff should be in the WWE Hall of Fame. That's probably the only wrestling Hall of Fame he should really be in, because specifically to his role in the WWE and their growth and success, he played a big part mostly when working against them, not necessarily as much when working for them.
But if you
go ahead, go ahead.
I was going to say, but if you consider the WWE Hall of Fame, look, the WWE Hall of Fame is a fucking joke.
Well, I know Pete Rose I mean and Drew Carey and whatever. Yeah, we know this.
I understand it's an honor and people feel honored to be inducted, that Vince just chose their name that year to put them in. So I'm not taking away the feelings that the inductees have, but in terms of the actual process, it literally is Vince picks who goes in, just on a whim. This year we need a few guys, a main eventer, a woman, an African American.
Well, no.
And then we got our class that year. I mean,
Hold on.
Yeah.
No, that is not a Vince whim. That's a Vince directive.
Well, there you go.
Who fills those spots? There is a legitimate quota that you've got to have one or two main event ticket sellers. You've got to have a woman. You've got to have somebody who was deceased. You've got to have a person of color. You've got to. There's a few boxes, but then within those, Vince chooses. It's not really a whim. People pitch people, and then he either decides on those or he has a whim. So it's both things, but.
And sometimes it's nuts. Like he refused Pat Patterson when Pat Patterson wanted Ray Stevens to go in when they had
in San Francisco.
And Vince wouldn't do that, which, I mean, come on. Why not? You put Abdullah the Butcher in Atlanta, you could do Ray Stevens in San Francisco.
But anyway, the thing is, I'm not going to disagree with Eric Bischoff going in this particular Hall of Fame.
That's what I was going to say, though. I was going to say, if you look at the WWE, if you actually try to find a way to justify who gets in and why, and you say it's for the stars of WWE, and if you look at WWE as the company that swallowed up WCW, they own WCW, they own all the intellectual property, they own the videos, they own everything. Bischoff, forget about him as an executive, as an on-air personality, based on what he did in WCW, but he was even better on air in WWE, to be honest. I think there's, if you were trying to make a legitimate argument for this Hall of Fame at the directive of Vince McMahon, there's the argument. He was an on-air character for both companies. He was well known amongst the casual wrestling fan and the person watching every week.
The thing that Eric Bischoff excelled at was being a television performer, playing a crooked, smarmy con man executive. Imagine that. And you can make the typecasting jokes, but no, he was excellent at that. For the people who say, but he beat the WWE 83 weeks in a row, or he did this or he did that. Let's face every other piece of Eric Bischoff's career was the success came from him being able to talk people into giving him chances to do things that he had never done before and had no idea how to do. And he walked into Vern Gagne's office and basically he started selling advertising for the AWA, right? TV ads.
He had a game, Ninja Star Wars.
Okay, well, yeah.
Thank God George Lucas didn't sue the shit out of him. But Ninja Star Wars he had.
And then because he looks like John Davidson, look him up, kids. It's hilarious if you ever, in the 70s, 80s. But he looked like John Davidson. They put him on TV because there was the dying days of the AWA, and they'd lost most of their great announcers.
They put him on the TV when Larry Nelson went AWOL on a cocaine and alcohol binge.
Well, yeah.
But the other funny thing I always found is when people would talk about Bischoff, people who didn't like him typically, and they would say, this guy looks like a game show host. Specifically, he looked like one game show host. It wasn't like just a generic game show host. No, he looked like John Davidson. That was it.
Davidson. Yeah. But anyway, I mean, we're not even slagging him off here. He's told these stories, right? And from the AWA, he's there. And, he's the, B or C announcer or whatever. And he gets the chance to go to Atlanta because he has people fabricate letters for him telling the folks at Turner who knew nothing about wrestling that he was more integral and experienced and important in Vern Gagne's operation than he really was. I've spoken personally to one of the people that he had fabricate one of those letters that had worked for Vern for a while on the theory that guy would then get a job as soon as Bischoff got in down there, and that didn't happen.
But did he, and I know who you're talking about, and I'm guessing you don't want his name out there.
Well, I don't know if he wants it out there.
But did he falsify? Because it's one thing getting hired as a commentator. He was hired as like the C-team commentator. Because you had Jim Ross, then you had Shivani, then you kind of had the Gordon Soley, Eric Bischoff level. Because Gordon Soley by that point wasn't Gordon Soley of 10 years earlier. So he wasn't even hired to be like a main commentator. He was just a guy there. Were the notes falsified then, or was it when they got rid of Bill Watts, or when Bill Watts quit, depending on who you talk to?
Okay, well, yes, he got the C-team spot as an announcer and then padded his resume to try to pitch getting the executive job. But point is, then he did pretty much fuck all or nothing until he accidentally had to blurt something out to Ted Turner, and he's told that story. And then he had to figure out how to do that. But then once that he got him to open up the checkbook, and spend money and go head to head, and then he steals the invasion angle from Japan, and then he's got a couple years where he's got most of the giant stars in the business and an open checkbook and fucking runs with it, and then fumbles the ball and fucking crashes nose first at the 10-yard line and loses more money than any wrestling promoter ever before he even, or in between the times that he was home and they were still losing money. He lost more money just the time that he was in charge over the last year than any wrestling promoter or year and a half wrestling promoter in history had ever lost. And
would they have canceled WCW if they had only lost $10 million a year as opposed to whatever it was, $60 million a year?
No, because that was programming. But when you get to $60 million, they could get a whole lot of goddamn sitcom reruns for $60 million. Anyway, so then that's where he was able to at least shine in wrestling for the period of time, because when finally Vince brought him in, it fit. He was the smarmy con man executive that the crook that tried to fucking put him out of business, and he's a wonderful heel television performer, character, speaker, etc. It's the only thing he's ever actually, in wrestling, he's had a number of jobs, and that's the only one he's done well. Because all the people talk about what a success he was as a revolutionary, groundbreaking promoter. He was a fence post turtle. He accidentally blurted out shit to get to where he was, and then he fucking stumbled onto success and then could not maintain it more than 2 years. I mean, you measured success in the wrestling business in at least in the old days by longevity, because everybody had their shit periods. But Jerry Jarrett said, for example, he said he didn't consider anybody a success or a failure until they'd been in the business for 20 years or so. Then you might actually see something. But, no, I don't think Eric Bischoff was a good announcer. I don't think he was disingenuous and unlikable, because that was his natural personality, and that's why he was such a great heel. He was a lousy promoter because he, as I said, he falsified his background and talked people who didn't know any better into getting into these jobs, thinking that he knew what he was doing, which he didn't. And then he lucked into some shit, and then he fumbled it. But then coming into the WWF as the asshole that tried to take him out of business, and just being allowed to be a heel prick con man in a wrestling context, he was a natural and has basically lived off that ever since.
And what a stupid decision it was. You're finally bringing Eric Bischoff. They blew it with the invasion. There were guys they needed that they didn't want to pay, so they didn't bring him in. And then Bischoff comes in, a couple years later. The first thing they have him do on TV is hug Vince McMahon. That was your opportunity right there. Who could challenge Vince McMahon? Who could put a fight to him? Eric Bischoff. And then you could do something. But instead they had to belittle him in a sense and make him under Vince McMahon on TV as a character.
But at that, here's the thing. And I see where you're going and I see what they were doing. Vince at that time was a heel. Eric Bischoff could not come in and be the babyface against Vince McMahon. He might have, but it wouldn't have been that good.
But he could have been a bigger heel to turn that heel.
No. Because in the scheme of, think about this. I said Eric Bischoff was a great, smarmy heel con man. Vince McMahon, at that period of time, Mr. McMahon was still the best heel character possibly in the history of the business. And they did not think that Eric Bischoff or anybody else was important enough to switch Satan heel just because one of the devils wants a run as a heel. So they had to make Eric subservient to Vince. And I see where you were going too. It would have been great if either Vince was a babyface or whatever or just not be aligned. I don't know, but I see where they weren't going to fuck with Mr. McMahon to bring Eric Bischoff in. And remember, he'd never worked there before. They didn't know whether they'd get fed up with him in fucking 3 months and kick him out. And then what had they done to Vince? So I can see why they did what they did there.
When they got rid of him as an on-air character, maybe I'm wrong. It's been a long time and I haven't rewatched this since it first aired. Didn't they do like a fake trial where Vince was the judge and they decided that he was going to be let go and then they threw him in a garbage truck?
I don't know.
Am I wrong?
I don't know. 'Cause I never watched any of the shit. Really. I've seen clips of Eric Bischoff's heel promos at various points in his career. But I was not watching that shit on a weekly basis, nor did I give two flying fucks. But who else is it? Because now they got two classes, right, in the Hall of Fame. Last year that they didn't do, and more people for this year. So who else is... And it's all virtual. So there's no fans, right?
I don't know. I'm assuming so, but they are selling WrestleMania tickets, you know.
Well, yeah, but I heard the Hall of Fame is all virtual.
It probably is. I haven't heard anything, to be honest.
Well, Jim, what has to be wrong with you that you want to go sit in a fucking stadium with 25,000 people, even if it's a half stadium, slobbering all over you in the middle of a pandemic when most people still aren't vaccinated yet? You can't. This is going to be the last wrestling match it's ever held. Can't wait till June or, God forbid, go till September. See where all your skin will fall off. What is that mindset?
I don't know. I love the Mets. They're going to be selling limited tickets to games. I forget if it's 20% or what it is in terms of the audience they'll allow in. I'm not even considering going to any games. More than likely for the entire season. At best, late in the season, I'll go. But I'm looking at it like I'll return next year to see some home games. But I'm not going this year. I don't understand the mindset.
Anyway, but the Hall of Fame is virtual. Who's in it?
This year, the inductees so far are Eric Bischoff and Molly Holly.
We mentioned Molly, I think, on the drive-thru, didn't we, this past week? And
That's right.
And fine young lady.
For the 2020 inductees, Batista.
There's your main eventer. Let's see if we can apply all of these people to the quota list that they have. Batista, there's your ticket seller.
Well, there's another main eventer, too, the NWO.
Well, I said one or two ticket sellers, so there you go.
JBL,
he fits the cowboy demographic.
The British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith.
Wait a minute. Let's back up a second. Who's in the NWO? What group do they... Because at one time, there was like 52 of them, wasn't there? Who's the NWO group that they are?
They're only inducting the first three. I don't know if Sean Waltman was the fourth or the fifth. I don't remember.
He was six.
That's right, because he's six. Duh. So I'm so stupid. the ones going in are...
No, yeah, I'm fucking with you.
I think he was six.
No, he wasn't six, though, but he was six, because you know what's 1 + 2 + 3.
Here they are. Hollywood Hogan, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, and Sean Waltman.
Okay, I'll buy that as the NWO.
And, you know, the thing is, like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I guess, Hogan's already in, Nash they're all already in the Hall of Fame. So this is their Each of them will be 2-time inductees.
Is Sean Waltman?
He is for DX.
So I guess then that would mean that they're doing it like you said, like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. You can be a member if you're in 2 different successful bands. Okay, but who would be the only 3-time Rock and Roll Hall of Fame person? Who's been in 3 different Rock and Roll Hall of Fame level acts?
Eric Clapton.
Son of a bitch. All right, I figured you'd have to think about it for a while.
All right, because he's definitely in for the Yardbirds. He's in for Cream. I don't know himself. I don't know Derek and the Dominoes were ever inducted, but he's at least in for those 3.
All right, Derek and the Dominoes would be reaching on a Hall of Fame group.
Probably, but look, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's a fucking joke. They refused to even consider the Monkees for years because they said, they didn't play their own instruments and the songs were written for them and they were prefabricated. Meanwhile, eventually they did play their own stuff and write their own songs, and they really did sing on those records, and those records sound great. And if you're going to disqualify them for that, then what about the fucking Beach Boys, who I love? And I think Brian Wilson's certainly a songwriting Hall of Famer, but if you're going to disqualify the Monkees for that, how many of those records did the Beach Boys actually play any instruments at all on? But anyway, don't get me started. Jan Wenner, what a putz. Also going into the Hall of Fame for...
Well, wait, once again, ladies and gentlemen, the opinionated son of a bitch, great Brian Last. All right. Oh, hold on here. But so the NWO are going in.
That's right.
They're all already in. It's a double honor for all these people. All right, next.
JBL's going in for the I got knocked out by Joey Styles category.
Oh, come on now. Would you stop? No, that's your line.
That's Gorilla Monsoon's line, if we're going to be.
Well, but they're giving it to you now. You have been bestowed the custody of the would you stop line when I do things.
When you go too far. When I go too far.
And well, there you go. And Bradshaw, another fine example of cowboy gibberish. I don't know. No, I like Bradshaw. I like Hank. As a matter of fact, I have the fucking program insert that gave him the nickname Hank that's hung over my desk here because we were in the Molson Center in Montreal. That's when I was in Owen Hart's corner and he had the boxing match with Ray Rougeau and they had George Chuvalo in the corner. Vader against fucking Michaels that night, big card. And in the opening match, they had Carl LeDuc, Joe LeDuc's nephew, right? Or grandnephew, some distant relation, in a singles match against, his gimmick then was Justin Hawk Bradshaw, the cowboy, right? But it's in French. They wrote everything in French, and the French apparently don't know what a hawk is because he became Justin Hank Bradshaw. And whenever we looked at the program, everybody started calling him fucking, I still call him Hank.
When Dennis Carluzzo did the first Eddie Gilbert Memorial brunch and wrestling event, you were there, I was there, 1996, I believe. He had posters made up that everyone who attended the brunch got for free, and these were the same posters that I guess were hanging up in various places, advertising the show in Cherry Hill. And whoever wrote out what was going to be on there must have been a little sloppy because it said Jerry Thinking Lawler.
I remember it. Not Jerry the King Lawler, but Jerry Thinking Lawler.
But anyway, back to the Hall of Fame.
Okay.
The British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith.
I have obviously no disagreement with that whatsoever. I mean, Davey Boy would be of a level due to several of his runs up there that there should be no dispute. He's a WWF Hall of Fame guy. He's a wrestling Hall of Fame guy.
Do you think, I mean, I agree with you. Davey Boy should be in their Hall of Fame. He probably should have been in already. Do you think, would you make the case for the British Bulldogs as a tag team, or do you think they would avoid Dynamite Kid ever going in that Hall of Fame?
Well, I mean, look who's in it. I don't know if they would give a shit enough to put the Bulldogs in. Davey obviously had more time there and was a single star as well. All the issues with Dynamite. I don't know that the Bulldogs are like, we've got to crawl through hell with gasoline britches on just to induct the British Bulldogs as a team if Davy's in. I don't think they will care that much about Dynamite, to be honest with you.
Well, of course, the Bulldogs couldn't go in this year because the quota was already filled for great tag teams. Going in the Hall of Fame, Nikki and Brie, the Bella Twins.
All right. Well, hey, for the entertainment value or, section of the Hall of Fame, I mean, good Lord, nobody, I wouldn't think, can make a case that Brie and Nikki Bella are Hall of Fame female wrestlers. But as far as Hall of Fame entertainment personalities in the WWE, I guess, they got that TV show that people watch for whatever reason. It is what it is. I don't know that I would have them as first ballot wrestling Hall of Famers on my pick, but that's, it is what it is.
And finally, WWE superstar Jushin Thunder Liger.
What? Wait, was this even announced last year? I don't even remember that.
It was announced. Jushin Thunder Liger going into the WWE Hall of Fame.
He never fucking wrestled for them at all, did he?
He had one match, I believe, in NXT, and of course, a few matches against Brian Pillman in '92 in WCW, which WWE owns. But WWE owns it.
Talk about the chase the cat that ate the rat. All right. I mean, yes, Jushin Thunder Liger is a wrestling Hall of Famer. I don't think anyone around the world that thinks of Jushin Thunder Liger would connect him in their first or next 10 thoughts with the WWE. But nevertheless, there you have it.
They should put Tiger Mask in.
Well, that would make some fucking sense because he actually wrestled for them in Madison Square Garden and big Northeastern arenas and had a title that was at one point recognized.
That's right.
By the WWF. The junior, did they call it the junior heavyweight title?
I believe so.
Yes,
yeah.
WWF junior heavyweight title. That was before we went all cruiserweight on everybody. So that would make a little bit more sense, but they're not worried about making too much sense. As evidenced apparently by the hosts that they have called for, they have named, they have announced the hosts, Brian, of WrestleMania, am I understanding this correctly, are going to be the odd couple of Hulk Hogan and Titus O'Neil.
That is the news that, as we are recording, broke this morning.
Can we be any more obvious what we're trying to do here, folks? Is that the way to make Hulk Hogan palatable as the host of WrestleMania again? How does Titus O'Neil really feel about this? Are they stirring stuff up again by calling this much attention to something? I mean, isn't everybody mad at other fucking people besides Hulk Hogan by now?
It was my first thought when I saw this was, they are intentionally putting Hogan with Titus O'Neil so that it kind of drowns down the people yelling, Hogan's a racist. Which, of course, a lot of people think because there was a videotape of Hulk Hogan having sex with Bubba the Love Sponge's wife.
I forgot. For the younger fans, we should go into the background.
Bubba and Hogan were friends. Bubba allowed Hogan to have sexual relations with his wife, but secretly filmed it. And
without telling Hulk.
And then
party foul. That's a party foul.
And then literally came in after Hogan left and said, oh, there's our $1 million, that tape or whatever he said. But on the tape, Hogan talking about his daughter dating, I believe, a musician from Southern Florida, threw out the N-word rather
multiply.
Well, several times, but threw it out
in a cavalier fashion.
That's what I was trying to. How do I apply cavalier to this? Cavalierly. That's what I was trying to figure out. But yes, so obviously a lot of people felt that they may not want Hogan around. I know they're.
But hasn't he's been making he's associated with them already. He's done something with them before this, has he not? Since then,
he's made appearances. He was on that Raw Legends show we saw.
Yeah,
a couple months ago.
That's right. He was just on fucking Raw. So what?
No fans.
Well, goddamn. If they're gonna see, this is this is almost like, I don't have the English vocabulary to explain why this is so distasteful, and it's got to be distasteful in some fashion. Isn't it calling more attention to what he said that he's apologized for and he's appeared on other shows and it's been years ago, by having a black guy who does so much charity work and is like the poster boy for racial justice and awareness and can't we all get along? And he's the one that publicly, I think, has commented that he had a problem with what Hulk Hogan said after Hogan came back and apologized in the locker room a few years ago. Doesn't that not only call more attention to it, but isn't Titus O'Neil being put in the position of having to be the nice black guy that's forgiven Hulk Hogan?
Well, we don't know if they're
racist.
Well, here's the thing. We don't know if they're like hosting together where it's like them standing on a stage.
Well, for God,
doing their hosting duties.
Two hosts without having the two. What are they going to be in separate fucking countries?
Well, it's two
or
nights.
One's going to be in New York and one's going to be in. If they tried to pull that, we're okay. Hulk Hogan and Titus O'Neil are going to be the hosts of WrestleMania, and everybody's like, "Oh shit, they may come to blows." And then one's one night, and one's the next night. Everybody'd go, "Fuck you!" For heaven, they would. That's what that would be.
Do you think Hogan hits him with a, "Let me tell you something, brother"?
And I mean, and they want controversy. I sincerely hope that Titus O'Neil is on board with working with Hulk Hogan, because elsewise they're making the guy go out there and stand there and try to whitewash Hogan's past. And at the same time, they want everybody like we are now to be going, "Oh shit, Hulk Hogan and Titus O'Neil talk about oil and water. Boy, what kind of shit's going to go on there?" That's what they want. But it's I don't even know. I bet you that wasn't Hogan's idea, because I bet you the first thing he said was, "Hey, brother, don't you think that's going to dredge some old shit up?"
We're not even talking about the idea that we talk about every single year. We did it last year with Rob Gronkowski. How stupid.
Ron.
How stupid the idea of a host for WrestleMania is. It started a few years back with The Rock, because they couldn't come up with a more creative way to get him on the show. They had him come out and do like a 30-minute promo, and then you never saw him again. Then he went off on his way. Same thing. What the hell is a host of WrestleMania supposed to do? It's such a stupid, uncreative way to get these people who they want on the show.
But is it their fault now, or is it our fault because we keep buying it? Oh, so-and-so is going to be the host of the show. There's no host of a fight card or wrestling event or whatever. It's like they have made their product more of a game show environment, especially now with no fans. They've got the fucking colors and the lights and everything, and they have some people in the buildings that are there to cheer and boo on command or direction. So it's like a game show taping now instead of wrestling. So why not have hosts? That's what I say. Why not?
Because it's stupid.
Well, besides that.
And unnecessary.
Besides that.
Do you actually think, using Hogan as the example here, and we could talk about The Rock a few years ago, Gronkowski, maybe not so much. But do you think if they said, plus making an appearance at WrestleMania, Hulk Hogan, and then you can kind of speculate about what will he do, would be more effective as a selling point than the host of WrestleMania, Hulk Hogan?
No, what it is it's lazy booking and just laziness overall by a bunch of entertainment writers that don't understand the business that they're in and don't know what they're supposed to be doing. If I was going to have Hulk Hogan on a wrestling show that I was promoting, whether on pay-per-view or on the network, or that's supposed to gather an audience of some description in some form, then goddamn Hulk Hogan would be in some fucking put-upon babyface's corner when he went to get revenge. And it would be advertised in a match. And he doesn't have to take any bumps, but he can still stand flat-footed and throw a punch and cup his ear and pull a leg. And I would have him standing in the ring holding up the hand of my babyface that triumphed when Hulk Hogan made the playing field even, didn't fuck the heel, but instead fucked the heel's attempt at cheating or fucked the heel's friends and allowed the babyface to beat the heel cleanly, where then Hulk Hogan would hold that babyface's hand up and fucking everybody's music would be playing and the goddamn people would be cheering. And that guy doesn't have the scene stolen by Hogan, because we're going to be looking out for that. And you get something. If you're bringing any kind of legend with box office value or marquee name value or goodwill and history with the fans, don't just advertise, and so-and-so is going to come out and fucking do a cartwheel. No. You put them in a top match with talent that you want to elevate. The only time that I've ever really booked or promoted somebody just making an appearance for the sake of it was at Christmas Chaos here in OVW. We did that show in Louisville, and we advertised Jim Ross would interview Stone Cold Steve Austin live. That sold tickets, because it was Jim Ross and Stone Cold Steve Austin. And we had a heel come out and get involved to get the rub off of getting stunnered and etc., but we couldn't advertise that ahead of time. But otherwise, if you have access to a major name, figure them in. There's all kinds of creative ways. In the corner, special referee, watch the dressing room door, the fucking judge at ringside. I don't give a fuck. If they can still get in the ring, tag team partner, whatever. But just add the host of so-and-so. I don't. But it doesn't matter anyway. They don't need to sell tickets anymore. Even when the fans are allowed back, they don't need to sell tickets anymore. So no show needs to be big anymore.
Well, Jim, speaking to the idea that they don't need to do big shows anymore, let's talk about Young Rock, if you watched it this week.
Well, yes, I did. And have we heard about the ratings? It's still doing more viewers than any actual wrestling program on the air. Isn't it? A program about the young life of a former pro wrestler does more viewers than any wrestling program.
I mean, it is on one of the major networks, but one thing I did see, the person who's the showrunner for the show is apparently the sister of Nick Khan, the president of WWE. So that means there's a Khan running the 3 biggest wrestling shows in the country right now.
I got news for you. Back in the territory days, there were 30 Khans running the wrestling business. But, no, I don't know how. I knew you wouldn't have anything to pick apart or complain about in this episode of The Young Rock, being as the historian that you are, because there was no wrestling in it. But Rocky Johnson is still full of shit, but he gave some good advice at the end of the program, and they had that warm bonding moment between father and son. I don't know enough about college football or pro football to pick apart the football portions of the program. I like the college rock guy possibly better than the teenage rock guy, but this sort of came off like an extended, 20-something minute after school special just to get to the heartwarming father-son moment at the end. Is it a comedy? Is it a drama? What's going on here?
I just don't think it's a very good show. It's kind of fluff. And they could have gotten to the point probably a lot quicker. I mean, it was funny to see a version of Luke Campbell from 2 Live Crew in this out of nowhere. I'm going to tend to think that may be a real story somehow, because why else would you have Uncle Luke in this.
Well, and Cheech was they're all the Miami fans. Cheech was there. But you're right. There are always points of the show that are good or entertaining or whatever for a minute, but it takes a while to get anywhere. I like Atta. She's probably the most.
Yeah. She even looks like Atta.
Yeah. But I'm not sure about the show having the life that a great show would need to have.
Maybe it's just me because you know the guy. But I think.
Well, it's not like we hang out all the time. I haven't spoken to him recently, but I've obviously been around him.
But I think The Rock comes off really unlikable in like the wraparound segments where he's, I don't know, just really pretentious, really fake. I don't know how to describe it.
I know what you're saying. I don't know how to articulate it either. It's not necessarily unlikable. It's just
full of shit. I don't know what the term is.
No, not it. Just that this is scripted stuff. I don't know that possibly is it just the writing it lacks some oomph. They're kind of doing it laid back. It's not really real. I don't know. It's just kind of, it needs some oomph. It needs a heel. It needs a heel and a piece to stir some shit up. Where was that heel outlaw guy? I want to see that outlaw promoter from Hawaii a little bit more. But we were in Miami in 1990. That may be another thing. They're jumping around. And it's somewhat disorienting. I know it's stories from his life, but maybe if it was chronological, we would get hooked up into these people's things more. And maybe they would have done 6 shows with the young kid and then 6 shows with the teenage kid and 6 shows with I don't know.
Last episode we watched, Leah Maivia was a successful promoter, and her opponent, who was this Hawaiian cowboy, appeared to have won over Rocky Johnson with a ham.
Yeah.
This episode, all of a sudden we're told Leah Maivia was homeless, broke, and deported.
To Samoa.
To Samoa.
But that's another story. I don't know whether I'd like to have heard that story. Because I haven't heard that story. Have you ever heard that story?
I must admit, I don't know that story. I mean, I do know she got into legal trouble, but I don't remember the deportation and the homelessness.
Maybe it wasn't deportation. It was just a strongly worded suggestion that she go elsewhere.
Lars Anderson was deported to Colorado.
There's a fucking couple of 100,000 fucking younger wrestling fans out there going, who the fuck is this Lars Anderson they keep talking about?
What did he have? Was it the Aspen Wrestling Institute? Was that what it was?
Something like that. In 1980, when I went to Atlanta for the WFIA, the Wrestling Fans International Association convention, I got a chance to see World League Wrestling. Lars Anderson, it was on. I don't even know if Channel 46 was on the air in Atlanta. At that point, it was an independent station that was not Channel 17. It was like maybe it was 36 at that point, but the lowest on the totem pole independent station had World League Wrestling, which was Lars Anderson and some of the people like Steve Kid Collins that he would get booked in different overseas tours and places, introducing and talking about tapes from whoever he could get to send him tapes from. And he got that TV show somehow on in a number of places for a while.
That's where I saw footage. There's a tape going around of Thunderbolt Patterson versus Chris Colt from World League Wrestling. So maybe, I don't know if that would be Detroit or where it was from, but
Detroit.
Yeah.
Had to be. But anyway, what were we talking about? Oh, back to Young Rock. Yeah. Maybe they need a Lars Anderson. I don't know. It was heartwarming. Warmed the cockles of my little heart.
Like the little teases they give you of some of the wrestling personalities, although not cast. I mean, the Iron Sheik guy, who the hell is that guy? And the Junkyard Dog, his nickname, in the Observer was Junk Food Dog. They found the guy fatter then that version of the Junkyard Dog and made him the Junkyard Dog. So, I mean, look.
He doesn't look like Junkyard Dog. He looks like Mad Dog from Memphis.
Yeah, Mad Dog Boyd.
Yes.
So they take all of these wrestlers and they find people to play them, and it's not historically accurate. However, the show would be a lot better if it was just Young Rock running around with all of these wrestling characters. Just, you know what? If you're going to lie about shit, just lie about the whole fucking thing. Just make up the whole thing and have fun with it.
Anyway, you know, there was the and this is a true story also. It was to show where Rock got some of his determination from, that, you know, he got injured and separated his shoulder before he ever got to play on the team his first year and blah, blah, blah. And the episode showed him sitting on the couch and moping and being depressed and going, you know, through all of that. And finally, that was the heartwarming advice that Rocky gave him at the gym. Hey, you got to get up and stay in the fight. So at least Rocky Johnson was there in 1990 in Miami because they didn't have better help. But if they'd had better help back then Rocky Johnson could have continued giving away Miami Hurricanes flags to all of the people that he worked with, and Young Rock could have called the folks at BetterHelp for advice. That would have been, but now, folks, you don't have to worry about a situation like that. You don't have to go to Rocky Johnson or the nearest pro wrestler for advice in your life, because they do have the service called BetterHelp. It's not a crisis line. It's professional counseling done securely online with a broad range of expertise available from the counselors that you can set up an account worldwide, log in anytime you want, send messages to your counselors and get timely responses. You can schedule weekly video or phone sessions, so there's no waiting rooms, no traveling. BetterHelp is committed to facilitating great therapeutic matches, and it's more affordable than the traditional offline counseling. So they want you to start living a happier life today at BetterHelp. You can visit their website, BetterHelp, HELP.com, and read the testimonials from folks that are posted daily. We've gotten emails from Cult of Cornette members that have used their services. You can join the over 1 million people who have taken charge of their mental health with the help of an experienced professional at BetterHelp. And if you go to BetterHelp.com/JCE, then you can get 10% off your first month's services. So once again, this podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp, and experienced listeners get 10% off their first month's services at BetterHelp.com/JCE. Maybe the Young Rock writers should find somebody to talk to get some ideas from.
Like, I'll give you an example. I'm sure in real life, The Rock telling the story of waiting online to get into the club and then challenging the guy to a fight, and he looks in the alley and there's the guy doing kung fu moves. It's probably a funny story, but in actuality on the show, it went nowhere. It was just there and then it was gone. That's like one of those things where he has, I'm assuming, good stories from his life.
Great story.
But maybe they don't necessarily turn into great television.
You know what? It was like, I love Kevin Sullivan, and I love his wrestling mind, and he was a great booker, great with finishes and stuff. But one of the greatest angles that I ever heard, the whole build and the angle and the introduction of people in it and the culmination in the gimmick match, was one that he told me on Crockett's Plane in 1988, which it was the Triple Tower of Doom. You remember that 3-level cage match?
Oh, how could I forget it? Yeah.
Yeah. And to sit there for 30 or 40 minutes, I was transfixed. And I said, that is the greatest angle that I've ever heard. That's the greatest progression, the fucking match, the blow up. It's the goddamn greatest thing. And then when everybody was involved in it, did it all on TV and the way it came off and it was executed, there is something to be said for a great storyteller telling you the story. Because when that great storyteller hands his story off to other people to perpetrate it, sometimes things get lost in the translation. Anyway, a quick email real quick. from Will, and this is a week or so old, but I just saw it. But Will says, I just wanted to thank you and Mr. Last for the great content. It really helped me get through my youngest daughter's surgery. She had open heart surgery at 9 months old. The great news is she came home after 1 day in the hospital. Her name is Alex, and I was wondering if you could give her a shout out or words of continued encouragement. Will give you some encouragement because I don't think she'll pick up on it at this point, but we're happy about that and keep an eye on her. And that's great news. And I just wanted to you can record this, or if they still got YouTube in 7 or 8 years when she might give a shit, Alex, you're the greatest and we're all pulling for you.
That's right.
But anyway, I wanted to get that in.
That's a good story. I'm happy to hear that.
All right, here's another email we might be able to talk about a little bit. It'll prevent us from talking about modern wrestling for just a tinge longer. This is from Anto, who from Montreal. Anto from Montreal.
Short for Antonino?
Possibly, but I don't want to rocka. You may. Hello, Jim. I've sent this into the drive-thru several times, but couldn't get past the Charlie from Starkville log jam. It has often been said that Jerry Jarrett and Jerry Lawler would take turns booking Memphis every 6 months. How would the transition work? Would all storylines be wrapped up before the next took over? Was the 6-month period January to June and July to December, or did it vary? Any stories about angles being abruptly dropped when the new booker took over?
Well, the way it would work is all the wrestlers with European or Australian backgrounds would be dropped.
Yes.
And instead monsters would show up. That's what would happen.
No, and honestly, that was the transition from Dundee to Lawler, by the way, not from Jarrett to Lawler, because Dundee to Lawler, we did the world's only 8-man tag loser leave town match. I lost my entire fucking stable in one night. But we're jumping ahead of ourselves. I've had this email for a couple weeks and I've been wanting to try to talk about it, but it's so difficult to try to explain to not only modern fans, but also to even fans your and my age, but who weren't smart to the business at that point in time, weren't contemporaneously involved in it, don't understand how the whole concept of what people consider booking now has changed. But a couple of things to begin with. The 6 months was a generalization, and he says it's often been said, Jerry Jarrett said it in some shoot interviews, and I think Lawler may have also, but the thing I've found when talking to both Jerry Jarrett and Jerry Lawler about Memphis wrestling, even things they have personally done, been responsible for, I've found when you do something for 40 years, sometimes, unless you're like me and just have the fucking anal retentiveness of saving things on paper and etc., you sometimes, things are lost to the fog of time. It may have seemed to them like they would take turns every 6 months. In actuality, it wasn't a hard 6 months. There was no January, June, or July, December. It was basically always dictated by Jerry Jarrett, depending on the revenue of the territory. If it started going down and was down for a while, or Jarrett looked at the talent and or the shows, the things that were going on, and maybe he'd refreshed himself a little bit, or he had some ideas he wanted to put in, then they would figure out a way to make a change. There was the time that they brought Robert Fuller in from Knoxville, and we've told these stories, but Robert Fuller booked several months at the first part of 1979. And I say even then booked several months, but Jerry Lawler by that point was always really in charge of his own programs because he was the cash cow. So the booker would defer to Lawler on shit he wanted to do, just because that was the most easiest way to do things, and it worked. But when Robert Fuller finally booked the territory into almost insolvency, they were down to 3,000 people one Monday night in Memphis, and that never happened. It may be apocryphal, but I heard it that Jerry Jarrett looked out at that house and said, "Robert, it can't get any worse." And Robert had his spit cup too, and he said, "Oh yes, it can." And he was done that night. So then they just dropped everything, and that's when Jarrett shot the Tupelo concession stand brawl with Lawler and Dundee and Ferris and Latham, because they had to start from scratch and they needed to grab everybody's attention. But with the booking hierarchy in Memphis, when Jarrett started his company, for example, in early 1977, he obviously started it off and got it rolling. Sometime in 78, I believe, is the first time he handed it over to Lawler for a while, even though the movie monsters, Dr. Frank was a 1976 thing. That was when they were all still working for Nick, but Lawler could always do what he wanted to do because he's fucking selling out everywhere. But then at that point, I believe it was, you could tell differences. You could tell differences in their style, even though I was not smart to the fact that there was a booker at this point. From watching the show, you could tell the difference. And also business in 1979, after Jarrett took over from Robert Fuller, immediately got better through the summer, but then was lagging toward the end of the year, and that's when Jarrett got more involved and started shooting separate angles in Louisville that they'd put on the Louisville TV, and he was here in the Gardens more, and they were running some different things in Memphis. But Lawler switched heel at that point, but then Lawler broke his leg. So then Jarrett took over the book for a little while and put Dundee in. And then finally, when Lawler had come back and was ready to go, the business was tremendous for a while, and then finally things started dropping a little bit, and Jarrett took it back and gave it to Dundee again, which then when Lawler made his power play and had already set up a whole nother crew to come in and run opposition if he didn't get half the territory, then he already had guys coming in with a starting date, and so all of Dundee's guys had to fucking get their notice because they had to make room for the guys that Lawler was bringing in. He was the new booker. But anyway, so it wasn't just a hard and fast 6 months rule. More importantly, the booking. Booking was done differently in the territories depending on how the territory schedule was set up. There were weekly territories, like Memphis, for example, or like most of Georgia, especially in those years, until they started running the big major northern tours. Florida, most of the towns were weekly. Southern wrestling was set up to be weekly because they had smaller geographic territories and smaller population centers, so they wanted to have regular, steady gates and ticket sales from their regular towns. Then you had territory, and Dallas was weekly. You had a territory like the Carolinas that was only 3 states, but still there were so many mid-sized markets: Charlotte, Greensboro, Raleigh, Fayetteville, Greenville, South Carolina, Columbia, South Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina, Norfolk, Virginia, Roanoke, Virginia, Richmond, Virginia, Hampton, Virginia, Asheville, North Carolina, Johnson City, Tennessee. Just in that area, they were more of, in the old days, they were weekly, and then they expanded in the 70s, and a lot of the towns were run every 2 weeks. By the time that we got there, sometimes it was, Greenville was still every Monday night weekly, but Charlotte might run every 2 or 3 weeks, but you're at a 12,000-seat Coliseum. Point is, those territories were booked a little bit differently because they had to be booked farther out. And then you had the monster geographic areas like the major Northeast towns and or Vern Gagne's AWA. Those were monthly towns because they were major NBA arenas. They were distances you had to travel. Those territories needed to be booked definite card lineups for towns 6 weeks ahead at minimum, if not longer, because they had to book all those buildings a year in advance. And they were, in major markets. So the point is, everything about how you booked your territory depended on what style of schedule that your territory ran. That's why Vince Sr. not only had start dates for guys, but end dates for guys. Remember, he told Billy Graham when he won the title, he told him the date he was going to lose it, a year and 3 or 4 months down the line. That was an extreme example of pre-planning, and they had a booking formula that they went through. We've talked about it in depth, but, they'd bring a heel in and build him up on television. And then he would get shots at Bruno or Pedro or Backlund or whoever in the Garden. And 2 if he was a good heel, 3 if he was a great heel. And then they'd work their way around the rest of the territory. It was very formulaic. And because they had, major population centers, big buildings running once a month and the only game in town, they didn't shoot angles every week on TV or even every month. You very seldom saw them. Same way with Vern. That's why the TVs were kind of boring, but they sold tons of tickets. But down south, you had to get more creative because you had smaller populations, smaller buildings. You were running it much more often. They ran Memphis, Tennessee 4 times as often as they ran Madison Square Garden. In a weekly territory, let's say, for example, in Memphis, you did the live TV on Saturday morning. And the people in Memphis saw that, and on tape, it would air a week later in all the other towns. So you have to have 2 weeks booked. You have to have this week, and you have to have the following week. And then you're golden until you do the next week's Saturday morning television. Because then you can make any changes you want to make. Have I heard stories about angles being abruptly dropped? Whether a new booker took over or not, that used to be the name of the game, especially in Memphis wrestling, where they could change on a dime. But in a weekly territory, if shit wasn't working, you changed it at the next TV and you blew it off. You know how you blow it off? The babyface goes over. 1, 2, 3, clean. The end. Because in those days, when the people saw the babyface get even, it was over with. Unless the heel got some heat afterwards or did something else on TV or whatever. So when you did your live TV that Saturday morning, and then you'd go to the Memphis house show Monday night, you would already know what you were going to do in the finishes on that card, and you would do your promos for those matches that were going to be held the following week in Louisville and Evansville and Lexington and Nashville when that tape aired in those towns. And then you waited till the next Saturday morning on TV and you saw what your house was. You saw if the people were interested in what was going on, and you furthered it if they were, and you cut it off if they weren't. The famous story, Lawler and Dundee in 77 had gone 11 or 12 weeks in a row. All summer. I think 3 or 4 sellouts. They drew in 12 or 13 days, they drew about 100,000 people, 12 or 13 shows. So Jarrett had scheduled the hair match where Dundee would get his head shaved and Lawler would go over as the blow-off. And now people are saying, well, why is the goddamn heel going over in the blow-off? Because Lawler was then going to retire, come back 6 weeks later as a babyface. So there was a method there. But when we got there and they saw 10,000 people and they saw the goddamn people were going crazy for the match, Jarrett realized they'd cut it off too soon. So Dundee got his head shaved, and then as soon as he came back, Jarrett said, hey, we can bring this back. What? How? Well, Beverly won a haircut, and he put his wife's hair up the next week, and they got another fucking house out of it. But conversely, there's been many more times where he would just say, this ain't working, it ain't drawn, we're going to change it. Which was as simple as the babyface going over on Monday night and both people involved, whether it's singles or tag teams, getting involved with somebody else on TV the next Saturday morning. Because booking itself was not these long, drawn-out, complicated TV formats, and everybody's interacting with everybody else, and it's the staginess and the backstage promo and this and that, and the drama and the, dinner theater verbiage and all this other stuff, it was, okay, so-and-so's the champion, so-and-so's the challenger. We're going to have them have an argument on TV, or we're going to have them have a fight on TV stemming from something that happens, boom, boom. And then they're going to have a match. And then in the first week, the heel's going to get disqualified to save his title. So the next week, we might come back with no disqualification. Well, then the heel fucks the babyface. Then, God damn it, the babyface is mad. All right. Then, however, the babyface got fucked. If it was outside interference, then you might want somebody in your corner, or you might want two referees, or if I've seen them do matches where the heel won one week with a foreign object, so the next week they had 5 fans allowed to search the heel for foreign objects before the match. That was the stipulation. And they would keep building it up until finally you got to the cage, or the fucking Texas death match, or the street fight, or whatever, and you could get 10, 12 weeks out of shit like that by just increasing the stipulations based off the finish of the previous match. Or at any time, if it got old, you could just cut it off. And now people think that booking is some kind of goddamn screenwriting, and everything has to be written, and every move and verb and everything has to be planned out ahead of time. No. Bookers, matchmakers were football coaches. They picked a team of talent that they knew or felt could draw money and some underneath guys to get their ass kicked. And they put them in situations with each other where they gave them the instruction. You're mad at him because he said this, or you're mad at him because he did that. Go out. And the guys would, as Dutch Mantell says, run the play. And they would get the thing over with people. And the booker or the matchmaker would call a finish that was designed to have some fluke or quirk or whatever that would naturally lead to a rematch that the people would want to see their hero with a fair chance to get even. And somehow he would always have stumbling blocks put in his path until finally the ultimate stipulation to take care of all the problems that he's been having would come about and he'd win. That's matchmaking. You get people that can draw money, that can get over as heels or baby faces. You expose them on television and establish them and play to their strengths and give them something to talk about and something to do that people will give a shit about, and let them do it. And then you book matches against those people with you're either building someone for later or you want them to have a program. So you come up then with finishes to lead to stipulations, to lead to rematches that people also might care about, and that's what makes the world go round. And it's on and on and on. You can't have fucking 8 matches all with goddamn ridiculous storylines and stipulations, or you've got a goddamn mess. But you can't have 8 just bland, cold matches with name versus name, regardless of how great workers they are, because then nobody gives a shit, because personal issues draw money. You have a wrestling card where you start out with wrestling, and you get a little fancier and a little bigger and a little more star power along the way up until finally you got 3 or 4 matches with some type of story behind it and 1 or 2 clear main events out of those 3 or 4 matches. And you pay the guys on top more than you pay the guys on the bottom, just like you pay the goddamn janitor a little bit less than you pay the fucking CEO in charge of the whole company. And the extras in the movies get paid a little bit less than the star. But one of these days, the extra can be a star if he's in enough movies. That's how this shit worked. It's not that fucking difficult. They've mucked it up and made it so ridiculous and complicated that now booking to people means, well, I didn't like the way they booked that match because he did 3 arm drags. Like a booker would ever... I don't know how long it was after I got in the business before I heard a booker specifically instruct someone in a match I was in to do a specific move. And that's only because it was part of the fucking, the whole point of the finish. So it's not about, as far as the storylines being wrapped up or dropped or whatever, the whole reason the storylines got started was not because somebody pitched I think this would be so cool if we do this, or we could be the first people to have this kind of match in this country. Or, wow, wouldn't it be great that Uncle Dave might give us a bunch of stars if we have this kind of match? It was, how can I make these motherfuckers sell tickets? That's all.
In terms of just the booking, would you have preferred for Smoky Mountain Wrestling to have been a weekly territory as opposed to pretty much every month you would go to Knoxville or different towns? Would you have preferred would it have been easier or harder for you if it was every week?
Well, oh God, easier or harder for me. Here's the thing. It would have been easier to book in terms of, we had to do, because of the expense of television, we had to do 4 weeks of TV at most. A lot of TVs were 3, but a lot of TVs were 4. 3 to 4 weeks of television in one taping. When you're doing that, so as not to reveal anything ahead of time, you have to leave holes for VTRs to be put in of shit that hadn't happened yet. But you at the same time have to give your announcers enough of a fucking idea of what's going to happen that they can vaguely refer to it on the tape that you're doing, even though it hadn't happened yet. And then you got to go through that whole thing, and that is difficult. At the same time, if we'd have had a weekly live television, it would have been great for being easier to book and easier to keep up with, and only having to do one show at a time, etc. But your problem also there is running weekly towns in that day and age. That was at a point where even Memphis wasn't drawn with that history behind it. You couldn't get them out every week anymore. And we probably, if we'd have run Knoxville weekly instead of monthly on our average Knoxville shows, not the big major blowout shows, but just the average Knoxville house show, we probably, if we'd have run weekly, would have done almost as many people as we did for the monthly show, because those were the people that were there to see any wrestling that was presented. Right? They were going to go to every show, our regulars. But the problem is that it wasn't worth any. By the time that we did a regular show in Knoxville, it was a break-even proposition because of the rent and the expense and the blah, blah, blah. On the big shows like Night of Legends or Super Bowl or Sunday Bloody Sunday or whatever, we could walk out of there $20,000 and in the black. But to just have had the regular amount of people, we would have either broke even and done a lot more work or lost more money. So, and I mean, the thing about the weekly territories was, before we ran them all off, we had them. It had taken people years to establish those territories back in the distant prehistory of the fucking 40s and 50s. And they kept them going weekly for decades. And then all of a sudden, the wrestling business decided it was too big for its britches in 1988. And in 3 or 4 years, ran every single territory out of business. And we ran those fans off when the same wrestlers 3 or 4 years later came back to the same towns and ran in the same buildings. Nobody wanted to go to see it because they'd seen the business had been exposed. They'd seen the cartoon stuff. They lost. The 90s was lost for 10 years, from 88 until the Attitude Era. The old fans went away because they felt put upon and lied to. And they found something else to do, and they got a bad taste in their mouth about wrestling. And the wrestling that was being presented almost everywhere, WWF, WCW, was not making any new fans. When we started Smoky Mountain, we were able to get a decent portion of the fans that existed in that area to come back, but not nearly all of them. And, it just, the whole economics of the business changed, because even during the Attitude Era, as hot as wrestling was, nobody was running even monthly in any city in America, much less weekly. It was, yeah, we're hot in New York this week, we're hot in Chicago this week, we're hot in Los Angeles this week, but they weren't even running the Garden more than 2 or 3 times a year. So it was a whole different thing. Wrestling was hot nationally, but it wasn't as hot in any specific part of the country that it had been during any time that the territories were hot.
One final question. Jerry Jarrett was certainly a booking genius.
Yes.
Do you consider Lawler a good booker or not?
I consider Lawler a good booker for himself.
Right, but as someone who was in charge of a whole territory for months at a time.
No, but here's the thing with the King. Dundee was a much better booker for the territory, even though Lawler drew more money. Dundee was a workaholic. Dundee would show up first thing at Jarrett's house at the office after trips every morning. Dundee, agonized over it. Dundee worked his ass off in and then he went out there and worked as hard in the ring as anybody else on the card. That was him. Lawler was like, his thing was he would literally write the format for the Memphis TV show that was live on Channel 5 on Saturday morning in front of 300,000 people in the car with the dome light on the way back from the Friday night spot show back to Memphis with Jerry Calhoun or somebody driving. And I've probably got a few of his formats around here. It was just, he'd have it in his head, but it would be Brian versus Jim, seg 1, seg 2, interview Jimmy Hart, seg 3, Lawler versus so-and-so, an interview. And then what he would do is he'd get there at 10 o'clock, an hour before we went on the air, if we were lucky, because all he had to do was drive down Walnut Grove Road, and he'd call seg 1 into the bathroom where he dressed, and he'd give him seg 1. Here's what you're going to do and say, kind of. The idea is what you're going to say, and the finish, what you're going to do, and how much time you might have. Then he brings seg 2 in while he's putting his boots on. And then he brings seg 3 in. It was the most laid back. And just like Guy Coffey used to say, $1 million business run like a flea market. It was run by the seat of his pants. It was natural to him. And he's the person who never gets upset. I've said so many times, if he's playing cards in the dressing room, they come in and said, King, the arena's on fire. Well, guess this have to be the last hand. So, and Jerry was also, he couldn't say no to people. When people would call him and ask him if they could come in the summer of 1983, there was 40 guys in the Memphis territory. And the opening match one night at the Midside Coliseum was a 10-man tag. And everybody got $50. But the thing is, that's Jarrett would take it away from him, because he'd say, fuck, I could have spent $100 for an opening match. Instead, I spent $500. And what the fuck? Nobody gave a shit anyway, because it's a 10-man tag with 10 of 40 guys in the territory. Lawler would just let you starve and leave on your own. And then he'd say, well, we hate to see you go, but I got to go somewhere.
So how do you think it would have worked out in 83 if you really had a war? If you really had Jarrett and his biggest strength, which was his booking, with Bill Dundee, against Lawler and Lance Russell, where their biggest strength was the star power of Jerry Lawler.
And the TV.
What do you think would have happened?
I've said this before. It killed them both. Lawler would have, if Lawler and Lance had gone with him, then they could have gotten a TV show on any station in Memphis. And Jarrett, I doubt, would have rolled over without a fight, although Channel 5 may not have been happy that they lost Jerry Lawler and Lance Russell. They still had to deal with Jerry Jarrett for a television program. But what I've thought would happen is that Louisville and Evansville and Lexington and Nashville would have been mostly unchanged, except the houses would have gone down with no Lawler. Jarrett would have still been running in all those towns using the TV that he shot in Memphis. And I don't think that Lawler, if they could have even got TV in Louisville and those other towns, like Jarrett already had with the Memphis show, if they could have got their Memphis show on those stations, which I don't think they probably could have done, I don't know how that would have gone, but Jarrett would have lost Memphis sooner than later, because without Lawler, whatever Lawler did in Memphis would have muddied the water and taken over the whole thing there. So in the end, everyone would have suffered. Jerry Lawler was not a great businessman, and Lance Russell, I don't think, was getting involved to be the guy running the business. It would have hurt everybody, is what it would have done. So it was best that they worked everything out and stayed together, because then there was no interruption in the Memphis TV at all. All the towns remained intact, and they went on to do even bigger business for the next few years than they'd done. But it would have fucked everything up eventually, because Lawler needed Jarrett's business structure. Jarrett needed his top star. Lance was very important to either side, especially in getting television in Memphis. But, sooner or later, everybody would have lost out. And Lance was almost retirement age at that point. He didn't want to start driving around 400 miles to Louisville every week. So it's best that everything stayed the way that it was. But in the meantime, there was a lot of extra guys that needed to be ousted. But that was the thing. Lawler he's just a laid back guy, and he didn't want to it's natural to him. It's for the people that it's just natural to be able to do promos, he was the best ring general. Talk about the best booker. Bill Dundee was one of the best finish guys that I ever worked with. Jerry Jarrett was one of the best booking minds. Dusty was so creative and had all those Eddie Graham and, fucking legendary finishes to draw from. But Lawler was the best guy at just being himself, and also at calling a match in the ring with anybody to suit their style, and could still get them over. Nick Bockwinkel said Jerry Lawler was the best ring general he'd been in the ring with. Imagine that. How much fucking territory that took in. But even me, Jimmy Hart, whoever it was, you could be in the ring with Lawler, and if you just somehow heard and picked up on that voice that he telepathically inserted into your head without really talking to you, telling you what to do, you'd be okay.
That's one of the interesting things about what would have potentially been in 1983 a wrestling war. You would have had Jimmy Hart on one side and Jim Cornette on the other. Right?
That would have been interesting. Yes, I would have been over there in the Jarrett and Dundee camp at that point.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't even know how to explain the difference between matchmaking and what they call modern booking any more than that. But that's why there was only a very few people that could do it successfully. And once that they started doing it, they did it for a long period of time, because it was more of a feeling of the right people to put together, the chemistry of the matches and the angles, who's going to draw money with who's the best dance partner for this guy. Instead, they didn't concentrate on, I want to book a match with this stipulation. They came up with the stipulation based on where the fucking program and issue and animosity between the two people had gone. A lot of these carts are put before the horse these days. Anyway, you sent me a bunch of clips. You sent me clips, and I'm still mad at you, about things going on in the world of wrestling this past week. And are we going to do our clips around the world segment now?
This is my attempt to keep you informed about things that are happening on shows that we're not actively watching, but thankfully there are segments and clips of segments that are available on YouTube and in other places as well.
Other venues. Walter has returned to NXT. Have you heard about this? Have you read about this? Of course you have. You sent it to me. I guess because of the quarantine thing, right? He hasn't been around. But have they loosened that up, or did they how could you sneak that big putz-faced fucker into the country? he seems like he would attract some attention.
Well, the other interesting thing is he returned to NXT the week that they had a big problem because they had a COVID outbreak.
Oh, geez.
Most of the people that had been regulars on that show, or at least a good portion of them, including the referee that you don't like and everyone else, had to be kept away. Triple H apparently couldn't go. He's either sick or in quarantine. No one knows for sure. But another major outbreak at NXT. Seems like it's always happening at NXT. AEW keeps things quiet until after the fact. Then you find out, oh, the Young Buck had it, and Jericho had it, and this person had it. But NXT, a whole bunch of people, to the point where Timothy Thatcher was apparently supposed to team with Tommaso Ciampa in the main event against the Imperium guys. I believe it was the Imperium guys. And Thatcher couldn't be there because he is either sick or in quarantine.
Yeah, well, so they made it a single with Ciampa against Marcel Marceau.
Yes.
Yes. Which, and you know, I've blistered that guy for his name because Marcel Barthel and Bartholomew Applegate, what's his partner's name? I can't fucking remember these goddamn awkward, unwieldy names. And I blistered them because of their unwieldy, awkward. Now, Fabian Forte is his name. But the clip I saw of Ciampa and Marcel, good action. And I watched this right after I'd seen AEW, so it was more striking. Sharp and precise work, a seriousness and athleticism, even if it's too fast-paced, even if it's modern wrestling, even if they're slapping their leg or their thigh or whatever, and it's still so much more professional and executed so much more crisply than the lesser trained independent talent on the other channel. Ciampa looks like 60 with hair. He shaved head and a gray beard was okay, but now he looks like he's 60, doesn't he? Because he really is bald, but he's gray. And he ain't how old is Tommaso?
We looked this up last time. I couldn't believe he was a few years younger than me. I think he's like 36, maybe?
Yes.
Maybe? Yeah.
Please shave your head again, Tommaso. But unless they're doing a Duck Dynasty thing. But anyway, but no, I mean, he's ripped, he's shredded. The match, they did good shit. And they look like athletes.
If Vince sees him looking like that, he'd be like, I have an idea. The hobo. Let's bring you in. You live on a train car.
But anyway, and then suddenly that music played. I love Walter's music. And out he comes with that stone face and that look. And he gets into, of course, Tommaso wants him, and he gets in the ring, and they got the face off, and then the two minions jump Tommaso. And here's another thing. Those guys in NXT, they make a point of making these, the babyface is fighting off 2 or 3 opponents by himself scuffles look good. You have to fight to get the guy down, and he's still struggling, and they're swinging. Instead on, over there on Romper Room, they just flop like a guy in the NBA Finals with a phantom blow, and then they throw phony-looking punches down on top of him. It's just... Anyway, so the heels attack Tommaso. He's fighting them off. He turns to Walter. One chop. Bam. Down, and he sells it. Walter has his guys rough him up, pick him up. One power bomb. Boom. Tommaso sells it. And Walter gets the look like, that's how you do it, son. And that's how you do it. You bring a big guy like that back and let him make an impact. And get his fucking chop and his fucking move over. And it's not that difficult. What'd you think?
I thought it was pretty good. It was nice to see Walter back. I like the idea of him against Ciampa or him against Thatcher. I would really like to see him and Thatcher. That could be interesting. Since we've stopped watching, a lot of people are saying, oh, you need to tune in. This is happening. Also, we have Adam Cole feuding with Kyle O'Reilly now, which sounds interesting.
I may have. Well, as a matter of fact, I saw their first match against each other in Ring of Honor when Adam Cole really got over with the Ring of Honor fans. That's the night that fucking Kyle split his mouth open with one of those kicks, and he was fucking geysering blood everywhere. And they've known each other for a long time, and they beat the piss out of each other. So we might have to go back. If I see any more AEW shows like we're about to talk about here in a little while that we can't avoid, I may have to go back to NXT.
Oh, and this was one of the good weeks for AEW.
What? All right, we'll get to that.
We'll save it.
Can you explain to me what's up with Alexa Bliss? And her pupils seem to be strangely dilated. Had she just, or undilated, had she just been to the optometrist? She's in a swing. She's got the weird eyes. She's challenging Randy Orton. I guess she's under the spell of the Fiend. She's in a swing, did I mention? This is ridiculous.
With fake crowd noise behind it, which makes it even more ridiculous.
Yeah, it doesn't. Why would there be, when we know there's not a crowd in the building, why would there be crowd noise behind a pre-taped interview in the locker room or backstage area?
I can't explain any of it. I will say that apparently this is one of the big matches on this weekend's WWE Fastlane pay-per-view event.
They're advertising Alexa Bliss against Randy Orton.
That's right.
Well, good. That saves me a lot of time because I have to do a bunch of orders this weekend.
We're not going to watch it?
You can watch all you want to of it. I've got work to do, and if they're advertising Alexa Bliss versus Randy Orton, that's a good reason for me not to watch.
But you don't know what could happen. She could turn into a giant monster or something.
What she does in her personal life is no affair of mine.
Well, that wasn't the only clip I sent you, which was apparently, seemingly, setting up a match for WWE Fastlane. The Shane McMahon segment, I think, may have been as well.
Okay. And I've said I like Shane. Shane's my favorite McMahon. What a guy. And he's in great shape. He's in his 50s now. He stays in great shape. He inherited the workout ethic from Vince. I don't know that his music fits him now. The money, money, money. He's not coming out dancing and doing the shuffle. But I didn't understand what the Braun Strowman. And I know we didn't obviously see the interplay that they've had over the past few weeks, apparently, where Shane has been saying these awful things about Braun Strowman. But Braun Strowman, 6'7", 350 pounds.
Oh, maybe taller than that.
Maybe taller than that. Is standing there in the ring. He's called Shane out, and he's telling Shane about how he's been bullied all his life by people like you. Number one, I can't imagine why or how that Braun Strowman could say with a straight face, I've been bullied all my life, just those words. But what kind of fucking idiot, writer or booker, would have Braun Strowman tell people he's been bullied all his life? Do you remember when Andre came out and said, yeah, I've been bullied all my life?
It's the same stupidity like when these guys, I think the Big Show did it actually, where they come out there and despite being big stars on national TV for so long, they're broke. They're afraid they're going to be fired. You know, Stephanie would come out there and start yelling at everyone that I'll fire you, and they all cowered because there's no other job these people could ever have except for this one. It's stupid.
Well, besides that, and he's been bullied all his life by people like you. Who? By Ivy League school people? How many Ivy League school people did Braun Strowman come in contact with?
Did Shane go to an Ivy League school?
Well, probably. I don't remember.
I don't know.
I wasn't particularly there when Shane was in school. But anyway, the point is, so he's going through all that. You don't give these big giants these human weaknesses. Find you a little Ricky Morton looking fella for that. But a 6'7", 350-pound giant, I'm sorry, my asshole bleeds for him when he talks about how he's been bullied. And then Shane apologizes, says he'd never make fun of him. And then proceeds to make fun of him. But the lines weren't funny. So what if the lines ain't funny? What the fuck? But there was the invisible wall that was stopping Braun Strowman from coming over and getting shaken, because they're 40 feet from each other at best, right? And Braun Strowman's there having a meltdown in the ring. It's not even an arena with security and all kinds of people. He could just walk over there and snatch Shane McMahon if he wanted to. But instead, he's flipping out in the ring until finally Shane accepts his challenge. What universe are we living in now where I understand the fucking cornering Shane into some kind of gimmick match, but Shane fully accepts a match with Braun Strowman just without any trickery, deceit, being forced, being cornered. And then when they actually have the match, he's going to run and run scared from him. But when he gets caught and gets bounced around a little bit, suddenly, before you know it, Shane is kicking his shit out of the 6'7", 350-pound giant. I like Shane as a person, and he is in excellent condition, and he's actually a tough son of a gun. But in this world, you're talking about a 50-plus-year-old son of a billionaire owner kicking a shit out of one of your top baby faces who happens to be a 6'7", 350-pound giant. Just so he can get the elbow in off the top through the table again. In what universe should this be happening? And then, to top it all off, after he leaves him laying there, leaves Braun Strowman laying there, holding his ribs, Shane goes under the ring, gets a bucket, pulls Braun Strowman up by his beard, talks him, and pours 2 buckets of green paint all over the top of his head. To signify where does the green paint come in? What is the green paint significant of?
He's green in the ring. That's the only thing I can think of. I have no idea what else it would signify. Did they actually say the word paint?
Well, that's what it was.
I was thinking green slime from Nickelodeon.
Well, I don't know if they said the word paint, but I'm seeing him with 2 buckets of fucking green paint from Sherwin-Williams, pouring it all over the top. As I told Vince one time, why might as well piss in his mouth while he's down there. Because Shane McMahon has beat this guy up, left him laying, and poured fucking paint all over him. So why should Drew McIntyre not be able to fucking break his neck like a biscuit? I don't understand. There were other clips. I wrote them down so I wouldn't forget them. Unfortunately, they're etched in my memory. Why did you send me Miz and Morrison arguing with R-Truth about their stupid fake 24/7 title belt?
Because once again, I thought Miz is actually doing a good job on the mic. This is the Miz that I don't mind.
I didn't mind it there either. I mean, he was well-spoken, but they're arguing with R-Truth about a fake belt that they make fun of on their own program. And I like that they said that, Bugs Bunny earned a Grammy, but he didn't earn that belt or whatever. I agree with Miz. Go do those things you're good at, Bugs Bunny. But it's still, if they're trying to get some serious heat on Miz, take him away, don't have him interact with the goofy guy with the fake belt that they make a joke out of on their own program.
Well, it seems like they're setting things up for Miz and Bad Bunny.
Well, bad news. What else did I watch? Oh, Tony Khan's done a promo. What in the wide world of sports was that? Is it on their YouTube show?
It was on, I believe, the new one with Paul White hosting with Shivani. I think it's Dark Elevation.
And they must be high. And it's Twinkle Toes and Matt Sydal have done something. And then here comes Tony Khan out on stage looking like a disheveled, coked up school teacher who's at his wit's end about his unruly class and said a lot of words in a short period of time, including the phrase 9 days from tonight about 16 times, and made a match. So now he's the on-camera commissioner. Is this, I guess, where this is going?
Well, they're saying that it's a one-time thing.
Possibly due to how the one-time thing turned out.
And some of the people who are defending it are saying, well, it wasn't on TV, it was on their YouTube show. But boy, was that embarrassing. I've heard people compare it to Herb Abrams. I actually thought
Herb Abrams sounded more grown up.
He sounded like a frantic Todd Gordon. You know,
yes.
Except Todd Gordon at least looked professional. Todd Gordon didn't come out there looking like a slob. Kenny, I'll tell you something. You broke the show. Kenny. Oh, my God. And everyone's afraid to tell him this is a bad idea. Don't do this.
I thought they'd already told him that. Well, I thought his statement was he was never going to be an on-air person.
Right, and then they excused it with Impact, which, of course, won me a bet not too long ago when I said he would be on air by the end of the year, and he was. But they said, well, that's Impact, and it's a paid commercial, it's a different promotion. But I still got the victory because he was an on-air character. Now he's on air in this role on AEW. And boy, it'd be one thing, too, if he was still dressed in a suit trying to pretend like he's professional with his little skinny tie and everything.
But he was having a nervous breakdown. I mean, it was like a fan had gotten the opportunity to do what he had always dreamed of doing on national television, and he freaked out and was having a nervous breakdown trying to do it. That is what it looked like. Oh, did I just describe what it was? I'm sorry. I don't... Please, Dixie Carter was a better TV character than Tony. Some people just don't need to be on television.
He's Gordon Scazzari with better social skills.
That's like being the nicest guy in prison. And a bunch of people again, hey, folks, you got to keep up on your obscure wrestling trivia if you want to be in with the in folks in the cult of Cornette. How did Gordon Scazzari end up? Committed to a mental institution. That's right. Okay. Good luck, Tony. Say, Brian, what are you doing over on your programs this week?
Another action-packed week on the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network. Get information about all shows on Twitter at Superpodcast or on Facebook, facebook.com/Arcadian Vanguard. A few notes here. Want to make mention, as I did last week, the latest episode of the Super Studcast for patrons of Ron Fuller Studcast, where this time Ron sits down with George Shire to talk about and to learn about the AWA. For anyone out there who's ever wanted a really detailed history of the AWA, check this out. From Vern Gagne to Hulk Hogan and everything in between. Patreon.com/Studcast. And don't forget, part 2 will be coming out in a few weeks. Ron's going to learn about Detroit. We'll have more information about that in a few weeks. Also want to make mention of the latest episode in a series of episodes of John Arezzi's Pro Wrestling Spotlight Then and Now. We are right now covering shows from early 1991, a very interesting period of time in wrestling. All the news is covered on the show, where you have Joe Pedicino and the Global Wrestling Federation at first seemingly buying Jerry Jarrett's company, and then when the money doesn't come through, just running on his own. You may know a thing or two about that, Jim.
I was there. I've still got a copy of the letter from the letter of credit from the Nigerian bank around here somewhere.
And then, of course, when Jerry Jarrett fell out with Kevin Von Erich, this led to another merger. World Class Championship Wrestling and International Championship Wrestling, run by Mario Savoldi, forming International World Class Championship Wrestling, IWCCW. A lot of things happening in wrestling. Incorporated. But of course, one of the big topics was Herb Abrams' UWF, and this is all playing out on John Arezzi's show because he was doing a lot of publicity for Herb before the check started bouncing. And on a lot of these shows, Herb is there. And the stars of the UWF, most recently we've had Paul Orndorff, Steve Williams, B. Brian Blair as disingenuous as ever. All the stars of the UWF on the show. And I want to play a clip for you, Jim, because maybe my favorite of all of these stars, and two guys who have been stars of Pro Wrestling Spotlight whenever they've appeared on it since the beginning, and there have been gaps in between their appearances because they almost got John kicked off the air a few times, are Larry and David, the Power Twins. For those of you unaware of the Power Twins, they are twin bodybuilding brothers trained to be wrestlers by Dr. D. David Schultz. They worked in various places at various times, were of course associated with the UWF, probably most famously appeared in a lot of outside of wrestling projects. They were the twin bodyguards in the Ocean's 11 films with Andy Garcia. I think they worked for Andy Garcia in the films. They've appeared on all sorts of TV shows and talk shows, commercials, and they were just probably the most obnoxious tag team ever to the point where they never got that big run in WWF. So here's some audio in the studio. Herb Abrams, the president of the UWF, John Arezzi, of course, the host of Pro Wrestling Spotlight, and Larry and David, the Power Twins. Let's go to this.
Sean, I got something to tell you. We've been doing this show now for what? Since you've been at the other radio station for a while now?
Yeah, that's where you almost got me thrown off the air.
Right. What I'd like to say is, you're a very generous guy. You'll talk to anybody. But I want to tell some of these people out there, these mental patients, if you feel you want to call, you want to talk to somebody, check with your doctor or your nurse first. Let them dial for you. I don't think you should be calling up anymore.
All right, and Herb also wants me to let you know that if you do want to hear from personalized messages from UWF stars or leave messages for them, you can call 900-420-4UWF. Back to the phones we go. Where did we leave off? Let's take first-time caller Rudy from Massapequa.
Yes, I have two questions.
Sorry about that. That the Power Twin just hung up the line on you, Rudy. I'm sorry about that.
Don't call while you're eating your breakfast, all right,
guys,
Rudy?
Don't touch these people call me each and every week, and I don't want any problems here with my callers. We're getting good response here today.
But
every time we have the Power Twins on, my ratings go down the next week by at least half.
What do they call you, John?
Forget about it. Mark from
they call
Seaford,
him a lot
next.
better names than they call you.
Mark, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I got a question for Herb.
Go ahead.
Herb, are you going to have a session out here on Long Island where we can meet the UWF stars?
We're working on that right now.
Because some of us can't make it into the city,
Well, no, Mark, the session is in Queens at the LaGuardia Airport.
Yeah, I know, but that's a little bit too far.
Yeah, well, there are
out on Long Island.
There are a lot of venues here that we've been talking to, so look for that maybe in March.
All right, thanks.
Hey, jump on the bus, you moron.
What's the matter? You can't pedal that far. Herb, you sign these guys checks now. Get them out of here. Get them out now.
Can you believe that? You know what? I tell you this, John. People will buy tickets to watch these two idiots.
Why don't you tell them who they're
get
wrestling?
Beat right in the middle of the ring.
Why don't you tell them who they're wrestling?
No.
Does it really matter who we're wrestling? The great, tremendous athletes that we are, it doesn't matter who we wrestle. We're going to win anyway.
Wrestling. I know. He told me during a commercial break, and you guys are going to freak out.
Well, there's more action like that.
I can't believe the UWF didn't take off.
More action like that on John Arezzi's Pro Wrestling Spotlight Then and Now, where we review the original broadcast of the landmark wrestling radio show, John Arezzi's Pro Wrestling Spotlight, each and every week with original audio. Check it out right now at pwspod.com. Also available wherever you find your favorite podcast. Also available on the Arcadian Vanguard video channel on YouTube. Check that out today.
It was a landmark show, but when me and Heyman were on it, it was a landmine show.
When Heyman was on it, it goes to a whole nother level. We have yet to get to the point where you're a regular, but you've made a couple of appearances so far. Heyman, of course, got into a fight.
I don't like to overstay my welcome.
Heyman got into a fight with a listener's mother and with a couple of phone operators already. He knew a scam because one of these kids, it's actually the same kid who he allegedly fought with the mother, calls up from a payphone and an operator, comes on and says, please deposit another 5 cents to continue to call. And Heyman knew what to say right away. He goes, Don't say anything. Leave it. I'll talk to the operator. And the operator comes on the phone. She goes, please deposit 5 cents. And Heyman just goes, operator, I already put it in. And she's like, well, can you press the coin release? He goes, I did. It's not coming back. And then he starts berating the operator. But great stuff like that on John Arezzi's Pro Wrestling Spotlight then and now. And of course, the 605 Super Podcast, the Mothership. Oh, ma'am, excuse me. Opening day Star Wars planned right now to kick off a new season of the 605 Super Podcast. Get ready, where we talk wrestling and baseball to kick off the baseball season. Be coming at you very soon, but go through the archives right now at 605pod.com. Available wherever you find your favorite podcasts. The Mothership!
God damn it, you keep throwing that second one in on me right when I'm unawares.
Well, hey, real quick before we move on, Jim, is there any way I can convince you to at least watch some of Fastlane? Because I do think...
Oh, come on!
I do think a lot of the listeners want to hear you opine about whatever
Alexa
is good.
Bliss wrestling Randy Orton in some falderall that we're all going to be ashamed of ourselves for watching afterwards.
Exactly. I mean, there's no way they're actually going to have a match against each other, so it's either going to be some weird cinematic crap that's awful, or she'll be substituted out. I mean, they'll get someone else in there. Maybe Bray Wyatt reappears from his Inferno death a few weeks ago, whatever it was. We don't know, but there are other matches. It's not like that's the whole show.
I set Ronnie Garvin's face on fire. He never missed a match. He was a tough son of a gun. Bray Wyatt gets a little third-degree burn on his pinky finger. All right, is this thing still on the network?
I believe, and I could be wrong.
I'm not. Normally, if it's a big show, I'll buy it and watch it on the big screen in front of my recliner at my leisure. But I might check out if they have main events on the network, if it's still on there. It's not cocked up yet, is it?
No, I believe this is the final pay-per-view event that's exclusive to WWE Network. Oh, actually, it is on Peacock, too. But I believe after this, they all go exclusively to Peacock.
That's going to be a fiasco, isn't it? Are we going to be able to find anything?
Well, I was going to say, I've already got my Peacock WWE discount subscription. Have you received any emails or anything about the switch over to Peacock?
I don't know how I got the goddamn network in the first place. You and Stacy got together and loaded it up here on this goddamn computer. So I don't even know what email address is on that thing.
Well, we will have to figure something out.
If they're going to screw this whole thing up, I'll just opt out for 6 months till they get it right.
So wait, it's like WrestleMania, 2 nights of WrestleMania coming up, I believe the 10th and the 11th of April. Are you going to buy both nights on pay-per-view to watch them?
Well, goddamn, I guess that would be wasteful, wouldn't it? But I'm going to have to figure out how to watch Peacock. I may just, if I can get them on pay-per-view, I'll just get them on pay-per-view, because then it's done and over with. I don't know. Anyway.
Well, we shall see, I guess.
I like the people who say it's on pay-per-view, PAPPRVIEW. When pay-per-view first started, all the guys, every time they'd write a note or write something, or you'd even see it on formats from The Office or whatever, pay-per-view. Like, what, we're going to sit there and stare at a fucking sheet of paper?
I have some matches, just so you know. Here are the matches.
Oh, God, all right.
That are so far listed, I don't know if they'll add anything because they really don't know how to book anymore. Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler with Reginald versus Sasha Banks and Bianca Belair.
I'll watch for Reginald.
Roman Reigns with Paul Heyman versus Daniel Bryan. That could be good.
Interesting.
That might be good.
Oh.
Big E versus Apollo Crews. Is Apollo Crews the guy I heard that they gave him a new gimmick where all of a sudden he's like a Nigerian prince?
Wait a minute. You mean Olu Oliani is back in the wrestling business?
All of a sudden he's funding Joe Pedicino.
If he'd have just come through with that $30 million for Joe Pedicino 30 years ago, none of this would have happened.
Hold on, real quick, I do want to check on this. Apollo Crews, does it say anything here about a new gimmick?
Breaking news here.
As part of the 2020 draft in October, Crews was drafted back to SmackDown, where he turned heel on the February 19th episode. His character would change to a new one when he declared himself Nigerian royalty, began to speak with a Nigerian accent in his promos in order to embrace who he really is, and began coming to the ring with a spear and 2 Nigerian elite guards. Okay, now I want to see this.
All right. I should have known something was wrong with that guy when he kept sending me all those emails trying to send me money.
And then the final 2 matches listed: Drew McIntyre versus Sheamus, and Randy Orton versus Alexa Bliss.
Oh, for fuck's sake. All right, we'll watch some of this just to see what foolishness transpires.
Terrific.
Yeah, that's what you say. Speaking of foolishness, you liked this program. I watched AEW this week, and we're talking about March 17th because I wanted to see if anybody else was going to make me trend on Twitter. I need to be prepared for if anybody else needed my help in getting over and becoming famous. But you liked this program? That's what you said earlier?
I liked elements of it. I thought this was one of the better episodes they've had in a long time.
What?
Even with the bad audio, yeah.
This was one of the better episodes. All right.
Look, it's never going to be a classically good wrestling show.
But no, a couple weeks ago I said this is probably the best show I've seen him do. And this show wasn't anywhere near that show.
I think the first 30 minutes, give or take, were really good for AEW with some good high points. Now, there was some real crap on the show, too. But I thought there was some good stuff on the show. And a lot of AEW shows I watch, and at best, maybe I get one segment I enjoy. There were a few things I enjoyed on here.
All right. Well, we'll try to ruin that for you. The first match was Cody against Penthouse, stemming from that vicious angle last week where Penthouse said that he would hurt Cody's arm so he couldn't hold his baby daughter, and Cody lost his shit and tried to kill him. I like Alex the Interpreter. He's got a slappable face.
He's good at this.
He's got a heel personality.
Yeah.
And I figured, okay, Cody can have a match with either one of the Lucha Brothers that might make some sense. So I went into it like that, and this was by no means as sloppy or as all over the page as most of the matches involving either one of the Lucha Brothers are. But as soon as here comes Cody down not down the ramp, there's no off the stage, I wrote down every AEW match starts with a jump start and every match ends with an afterbirth. And I'll be son of a bit within seconds. Penthouse jump started it with a flip over the top rope and body blocked Cody while he was still on stage. And immediately started getting heat on Cody. So now at least we know the Lucha Brothers have been baby faces and heels and back and forth. Now they're split up. Now Felix is teaming with Pac and Penthouse is on his own, but he's a heel this week. At least we can figure it out. So that was good. They had a match. I can't say this was a bad, rotten match like most of the matches they have on their TV show. It wasn't Cody's best work because, you know, it's still Penthouse. And they're still going to do shit. Why did they pull a cloth banner-wrapped barricade over the railing from outside the barricade? There was a barricade outside the barricade, which they pulled over and leaned up there, and it meant nothing for the next 10 minutes.
And why did the wrestlers sitting at ringside help?
Help bring it over. And it's a common theme. Every time somebody sets up some of these pieces of furniture, then they leave them there for 10 minutes. Why do you roll out and leave a fight you're in to grab furniture and set it up and don't do anything with it? Because 10 minutes later, somebody's accidentally going to fall through it, right? If it's fuck. Cody did a dive, knocked Penthouse finally into the guardrail, but it didn't make any noise and it didn't break because it's a guardrail. It went a while and they did a ton of big moves with everybody kicking out of everything. Like I said, it wasn't rotten. I don't care about Penthouse that much, but it was not a Cody classic, but it wasn't bad. But then suddenly Penthouse does the thing where he gets a hold of Cody's bad shoulder and snaps it. Boom, and Cody sells it, and Penthouse goes, ha, 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 and Cody schoolboys him, 1, 2, 3. Out of nowhere. What? And then, what did I just say at the top of the review? Every match has a jump start, and every match has an afterbirth. And immediately, Penthouse jumps back on Cody to get more heat. And did you see the horrible, fake play punches that he was raining down upon Cody's head and arm and vicinity of thereabouts?
Yeah, I saw.
They're on television. They act like that they're in the middle of a group and then nobody's going to fucking see this, and they're just doing meaningless motion, thinking it'll get lost in all this chaos, but they're on television. They're the only people doing anything. You can't get away with doing shit that looks like that. So anyway, he's doing that. Cody's covering up. Arn comes in and does nothing. And it buried him. Because as he comes in and just stands there looking like, should I stop this guy from beating the shit out of my friend? Then here comes Dustin and Billy Gunn and his son, and they make the save, and Arn is kind of left standing. I'm not saying he should have taken a bunch of bumps. Shouldn't he be, since he's closest, shouldn't he be the first one in there? Shouldn't he go over and grab Penthouse by the mask from behind and start pulling him off? Should Penthouse not then spin around and grab Arn, and he's going to do something to Arn, but there's Dustin, and there's fucking... It would have made it look like Arn was trying to do something instead of being scared to approach this fucking guy that he's twice the size of. That's just what I... And then here comes QT Marshall, who's late to the save and late to the party, and they're all going, where were you? And he's like, well... He was obviously just not fucking interested. So they're already telegraphing that there's problems with QT, what he said last week on the interview. Now but they're telling us that this is going to happen rather than letting us wonder. Couldn't QT have come out with a towel wrapped around him and shampoo in his hair and flip-flops on like he was in the shower? Shit. Wasn't my fault. I didn't know this was going to happen. He just walks out like, oh, shit, something's going on. So, of course, he's going to turn on him.
But no one cares. I mean, that's the other thing.
Nobody cares.
Cody is an AEW star. And for some reason, he has wanted to have this giant nightmare family.
Conglomerate.
Because there are all sorts of people in this, including Billy Gunn and his kids, who are always at ringside and then just randomly jumped into the ring to help out Cody against Pentagon.
Why didn't they? If they were going to do that, why didn't they get there before Dustin did? They were only fucking 20 feet away.
But here's the thing. Dustin is still great in the ring, although they really haven't been doing anything with him that we've seen on Dynamite in a while. I don't know what he does on the YouTube shows, if anything. You can't tell me there's anyone who cares about anything going on with the Nightmare family or anyone else in it, including this heel turn for QT Marshall, a guy that all of a sudden was there. No one knew who he was. All of a sudden he was a part of Cody's little group. He never really got over. He never got big reactions from anyone. And I'm not trying to put him down, but I'm just saying, why should anyone care about this? What is the point of this? And
because more people have to turn. We've only had like 16 turns in the last 3 weeks.
Cody's, I don't know. I was thinking this is too much Dusty. You're getting beat up after the bell and 25 baby faces need to dive in there and make sure you're alive because they love you. Whatever. All things considered, though, I thought it was one of the better. I enjoyed this more than most of the Pentagon Jr. matches I've seen.
Well, yes. His name is not Pentagon Jr. It's El Zero Mito Benito, Casa Bonita. I don't fucking know. That's another thing. Why did he change his name to something that no American can pronounce?
Because apparently the name Pentagon Jr. is owned by, if it's not AAA, it's maybe Lucha Underground. Someone owns it. He can't even use that name anymore.
Does that mean he needs to change his name to the goddamn biggest tongue twister in the history of modern wrestling?
I think it's stupid, but apparently it means something to him. So that's exactly what they did.
All right, Bar Brady was in the back with... Is it too early in the clip to say dumb fucks?
Yep.
Okay, well, Pieface and Balding were back there trying to do a promo again where they have that badass attitude, and then Don Callis comes in, tried to get him over verbally, which is a lost cause, but Callis's promo was good. It's just, it's the Bucks, and it just seems like everybody that's involved with them has their tongue in their cheek and nobody really means any of this. And why? If he's laughing about their father's injury while he's 2 feet from them with no backup, and they just allow him to come in and browbeat him like that. If I was going to browbeat a babyface, I had the Midnight Express behind me. So at least there was some element of, we won't snatch this guy right off.
They seemed surprised he didn't have the black eye that they apparently gave him, 2.5 months ago? Like, what about the eye? Yeah, well, that was a while ago, even if he wasn't faking it. That was a long time ago, Bucky.
But anyway, that was that. I know the highlight. I just realized why you like this program. Because of the next match. Jane Cargill against Danny Jordan. And Danny was a female Danny, I guess, with an I.
Jade.
Her too. She was a female, we think.
Oh, come on.
This was the smartest thing they did all night. 3 moves, 1, 2, 3. It's like the difference in Paul Heyman booking and Tony Khan booking. Paul Heyman booking show only the strengths and cover up all the weaknesses. Tony Khan let everybody do everything they can until they eventually bury themselves. But in this, they did it right. She fucking takes over on the girl, boom, 1 move, 2 move, boom, 3 moves is the finish, 1, 2, 3. That's how they could have got half this talent roster over at the start. If they, as we've mentioned, their backwards booking where they've started guys out having main event matches, telling people they were stars, and then a year later they start giving them squash matches and wins so that they can actually show them that they're stars. This, at least they're doing this one from the start to finish instead of backwards. Did you like Jane's work?
Jade, I don't know why you insist on calling her Jane, but yes, I enjoyed this. I thought it was done really well. It looked like she killed that girl on the German suplex. I do think she has a little bit of a Lex Luger problem. You know how Luger used to always play with his penis in the middle of matches? She can't stop playing with her hair.
She's got that problem?
No, she can't stop playing with her hair. If you watch, like, she keeps having to adjust her hair, play with her hair.
And play with the hair and do the move, play with the hair. Well, she's green, and that's her go-to thing. But she did fine here because it was laid out, and it was 3 things.
And she looks like a star. I mean, she looks like a star, so I'm still high on Jade Cargill. I wish they would give her more promo time because I can't get enough of that.
Well, that's when the Heyman-style booking will stop and the Khan-style booking will take over when they give her more promos. Let everybody do everything until they hang themselves. Speaking of promos, though, again, MJF, Tully, FTR, Wardlow, and Spears all together, whether they're in the suits getting out of the plane, whether they're standing there in the ring, that looks like a fucking heel group. That looks like a top guy group. They're all young. They're all dressed up. Spears didn't even look bad. Did he shave something or change something again? He did something different, but he's the designated flunky, but even he looked upgraded here. The Inner Circle, people wanted to act like they were the second coming of the Horsemen or whatever, but while you had Jericho and MJF, you also had, Santana and Ortiz. The group didn't look like a cohesive unit with Hager and Jericho and MJF and Santana and Ortiz. Everybody's off on a different planet somewhere. These guys look like you could buy them as a group that hangs out together. Do they not?
I think so. I'm not crazy about Spears being in it, but otherwise,
somebody's
yes.
got to drop the falls.
Yeah, but just look-wise, too. The blonde mohawk. He's the only one who didn't have a tan.
But anyway, Tully's been on their TV for a year, and he finally gets the space and opportunity to be Tully. He had something to talk about and a little time to talk about it. And then MJF took over and killed it. He was back to his old MJF. He was trying to erase the stain of all the comedy stuff he's been doing the last 6 months. And of course, it was he channeled little Ole Anderson after the Dusty turn. I had to pretend to like your comedy, Jericho. I had to pretend to like you. But again, a year and a half into this show, they start presenting people like they should have introduced them. I'm not saying no, all these people weren't there a year and a half ago, but you know what? This is like, this would have been great for MJF if he hadn't have spent the past 6 months doing the dinner theater. This would be great for Tully and FTR if they hadn't already been beaten by middle schoolers and made stooges for all the rest of the, outlaw fucking indie talent that they're hired to their friends. Then they do all these things to these guys, and then they put them in something and expect it to be just revolutionary and groundbreaking. Well, they look great. They did the part. Tully's promo was great. MJF's promo was great. But we've seen these guys fucking with cow shit slung in their face on a regular basis for months. So they're all of who's on whose side, who's a baby face, who's a heel, who's turning on who's mad at who, what group is together. Jesus Christ. I hate to sound negative. This was great standing there, but what they've all been doing the past 6 months, now we're supposed to care about these fearsome heels getting together to run rampant over this company. You see where I'm going with this?
I agree with you. I think that they've wasted a lot of what FTR could have been right out of the gate. If you're going to do something like this, you didn't have to prolong everything with MJF and Jericho for more than half a year. That was unnecessary. You could have done this a lot quicker. I did think during this is the second time they've done this with MJF, where he pretends to be someone's friend and turns on him. They did the same thing with him and Cody.
It was that right before they got on TV, that they were doing that deal, and then when they got on TV, that's when MJF finally turned on him and showed his true colors last time.
And they rushed through the Cody MJF feud. That was over almost before it even started.
So that they could spend 6 months on going too long with MJF and Jericho.
I don't know why they teased Wardlow and MJF breaking up in the past, because
they were going to do it, and then they realized, well, what the fuck? It's too soon. Nobody will give a shit.
And with Shawn Spears, look, I hope I'm proven wrong, because he's one of these guys that the boys themselves really like as a person, and they all talk about how great he is in the ring. But I don't know if that translates to the audience, and it doesn't translate to me so far. We've seen him with dark hair. We've seen him, I think, now with blonde hair. He doesn't look like he belongs as part of this group. It looks like he's being kind of forced into it. To me, I think there probably either could have been better choices, or you just do FTR, Wardlow, MJF with Tully. But I guess then you couldn't do 5-on-5 against Jericho and his clowns.
Well, Tully would be a better, never mind. I don't want to get him hurt.
But great promo. Can't take anything away from great promo from Tully. Excellent promo from MJF. And yes, you did do Chris Jericho's comedy bullshit way too long for this to be the payoff. You could have cut these legs off a little bit earlier, and it wouldn't have been as egregious as it's been.
Wrap up the storyline.
Yeah.
The very next match, we were talking about 10-man tag team matches. The very next match is a 10-man tag match. And whereas Jerry Jarrett was a smart enough promoter that he realized that he only had to pay 2 guys instead of 10, apparently Tony is not following that example. Matt Hardy, Private Party, and Butcher and Baker, with or without the candlestick maker, I didn't see her, against Dino Douche, Jungle Boy, Dwarf Dong Sucker, and Bear Country. 2 hairy guys out of the wrestling school. And Matt Hardy started with Dwarf Dong Sucker, and it broke into a 10-way within seconds, and I said, no, life is too short. I fast-forwarded. I don't know who won. I don't know what happened. I'm sure I missed some really egregiously embarrassing wrestling action, but I couldn't. To see Matt Hardy face off with this genetic mutant on national television hurt my heart, and I could not watch anymore. Did I miss anything?
No, I mean, this was definitely one of those, not just a bathroom break match, but a long bathroom break match. I don't know anyone who would have actually enjoyed this or why they would have. I don't know anyone who cares about Matt Hardy's group. Beyond even Marco Stunt being there, they bungled it with Jurassic Express. I feel like they're always losing. But this match, there was a whole lot of everyone selling for Marco Stunt.
Well, good, and I'm glad that I missed that. And how many times has Matt Hardy been a babyface and a heel back and forth in the last year? How many times Private Party been babyface and heel? How many times have Butcher and Baker been babyface and heel? And how many times have we ever seen Bear Country even on television? Embarrassing. So then we go to Eddie Kingston and Jon Moxley somewhere in the back in a completely empty lime green room. And they did a pre-taped promo. Kingston is more interesting than Moxley. When Moxley is talking and Kingston's reacting to Moxley talking, he's still more interesting. But they do their deal and they play off of each other well, but this was an interview and it took place in a completely bare lime green room. Did I miss anything?
I really didn't like this, despite loving Eddie Kingston's promos and personality. And when Moxley's on, he's a great promo, but this was too cute for me. This was too
they're
inside jokes, and I don't know if this was for them or for the audience, but I thought this promo was a mistake. It was really poorly done.
Well, and then, speaking of mistakes, what was that song they did for when poor Steve Regal, William Regal, when they decided to make him a working man with a hard hat and carrying a lunchbox?
He's a man's man.
He's a man's man. Well, poor old Christian has now apparently become the horse's horse. He's the workhorse. He's not a workhorse. He's the workhorse. He doesn't eat his oats before he's supposed to. He doesn't wander off from the work site. He pulls the wagon with no complaints. So they bring Christian out for a promo, and this is what he speaks well, and he's a great worker, but this is what they're hanging their hat on that will get him over more than he is now with anybody, is that he's the workhorse. And as we've mentioned, in a context of wrestling being a sport, that makes completely no sense. Only in the context of this being a performance does the idea that he works harder than everyone make any sense. And then that doesn't make sense because you're telling people that it's a performance. Do you see where I'm going with this? Why does he have to be a workhorse? Why can't he be Christian, former WWE Tag Team Champion, former NWA World Heavyweight Champion, a guy who's been retired for 5, 6, 7 years, but now feels that he has one more run left? Can he do it? The Rocky Balboa story. Can the wise old veteran come back and fucking topple the modern champions? He's had got all these opponents he's never faced. I'm a workhorse. Outwork everyone. Because it's a work. Because we're all fake. And this is why this is a stupid way for me to be selling myself, that I'm a worker. That's what I'm very trepidatious about how Christian Cage will be presented here. Can you tell?
I don't blame you. I feel kind of the same way. It's interesting that him and the Big Show, from what I've read, they've done a couple of interviews apparently, where they both basically said, I talked to Tony Khan, we had a phone call for a few hours, and I've never...
And by the way, that is a possibility, because there's a lot of talking on the other end.
And I never put a deal together this quickly and this easily. You know, these guys are all happy to be here and be getting that money from someone who has unlimited access to money right now, but I don't know. Christian, when he was an active wrestler, was very talented. I never saw him as the guy they tried to make him into in TNA. Nothing against him. I just thought he was a notch below that. Again, great in the ring, but not everyone who's great in the ring is a main eventer. And I don't know. It'll be interesting how this plays out. I hate the whole outwork everyone and I'm a great worker. I mean, that's just stupidity.
That's like a fucking card shark coming up and saying to you, I'm a great con man.
Think about it. One ex-WWE guy comes in and he's the best man, and that's still going on even though that wedding's over. Another guy is, I will outwork everybody. I mean, these are just such stupid ways of using these guys. Just
say that wedding deal. Not only is the wedding over, but the honeymoon's over on that whole deal. Well, we had a match come up suddenly. Kingston and Moxley against Gallows and Anderson. This big interpromotional feud they got going on with Impact. Remember what I said earlier? Every match has to have a jump start and an afterbirth. Guess what this match had? I'm waiting for you to guess.
I already know the answer, and so do you.
Jump start and afterbirth.
Yeah.
Gallows and Anderson attack Kingston on the stage because Kingston's coming out by himself because his goof partner has to fucking come in from the parking lot, right? So Kingston comes out by himself and Gallows and Anderson just jump him. And then Moxley shows up. I guess he ran in from the parking lot, and they have a four-way. And I wrote another jump start and guarantee they'll have an afterbirth. They do a four-way on the floor forever. Nobody's in the ring. The heels get the heat on both the baby faces, and when they're beaten down, then the referee rings the bell. Why would he do that at that particular point, Brian Last? Because somebody saw it in the Attitude Era. Because I've come to the conclusion by watching this television program that everybody in this company, both in the ring and outside the ring, thinks the Attitude Era is what classic wrestling was and the rules were, and a copy all that shit, but they do it even more often than they did this shit in the Attitude Era, which is why that it's so repetitious and boring. And they get heat on Kingston all the way to the break. So the babyfaces just got shut down. And considering the finish, you would have wanted to shine those baby faces at the start, but that didn't happen. Anyway, they go through a break. They get the heat on Kingston. Finally, Kingston hit a nice little desperation suplex on Anderson, I believe. Both of them sold. Kingston's hot tag to Moxley was lousy, but that was the heel's fault because absolutely nobody was trying to stop him. Mox did his comeback. He did a dive. Then the heel stopped him, and they beat both of them up again. And suddenly, Kingston foils the finish, the double team finish on Moxley, and Moxley small packages Anderson, and immediately they go into the afterbirth. And the heel start getting some more heat, and they chase the referee off. And the referee just runs away, and no other referees come. Did you see, again, selectiveness? One time, somebody gets their face slapped, and 25 grown security guards jump in immediately to separate them. Another time, a man is being sodomized by a jackhammer with a 14-inch dildo on the end of it. Nobody comes out to help, that is. So in this case, nobody's coming to help. Here comes Harpo Fingerfuck. He's skipping, and he's snapping his fingers, and he's prancing about, and he sets a chair down in front of Moxley and sits in it, and then Kingston comes from behind and blasts him off the chair, and then they kick the shit out of Kingston. And then, did you see Olivier try to get heat on Moxley by standing on his head and grabbing the ropes and making phony, stagey, funny faces?
Yes.
So they don't even take this seriously. It's just a big hoot to them. They're spending the guy's money, and it's all a joke. And they appeal to the people who want to laugh at wrestling, not with it. And then they Pillmanize Kingston's ankle in the chair. Nobody's trying to help. It's taking forever. They go to Pillmanize Moxley's throat. So that would have been interesting. But out come Pieface and Balding, and they stop them, but they don't make a save. They just go, whoa, whoa, whoa. Because they're still trying to milk this thing where the Bucks and the Gallows and Anderson are friends, or have been friends. Are they insane? What? Nobody gives a flying fuck about this 5-year-old past its expiration date Bullet Club horse shit that they're as bad as the Clique. They're as bad as Nash and Hall and those guys when they had their little treehouse club with their women's haters club in the boys' house. Nobody gives a fuck about their 5-year-old Bullet Club, especially in this country. The only people that even know what the fuck it was or that they were in a group together are already watching this program. Nobody else cares or gives a shit. And if they bought the shirt, it's because they thought it had to do with guns at Hot Topic because there was no pictures or names on it. The average person is confused. Wait a minute. The Young Bucks, well, they're good guys. Why are they out here trying to talk to the bad guys and they're supposed to be friends with the bad guys? And then they argued like children with Twinkle Toes and the Bucks and Callis and whoever else over whether or not the Bucks were going to too sweet Kenny. Their stolen hand signal from another group that had arrested emotional development 30 years ago. It was just so confusing. Why are they continuing to beat this Bullet Club stuff and think that anybody gives a shit when nobody remembers, nobody cares except the people already watching the program, and there ain't enough of those. They need to get some more. So all I know is the good guys came out to save the other good guys, but then the good guys and the bad guys had an argument about whether the good guys and bad guys were still friends, which means fuck the good guys. That's the way a wrestling fan thinks. What'd you think?
Didn't like the segment, didn't like the match. The Good Brothers have go-away heat with me. They're not good. I know you said you've liked them in the past when you've seen them. Carl Anderson.
They've aged. They've aged since then, I guess.
I've seen stuff with Carl Anderson in the past that was pretty good in Japan. He's never done anything in the States that has even remotely been good to me. And that team right now is just death. Gallows, I don't know if he has a blood pressure problem or what, but he turns bright red, if you notice.
He does. He may be, what was that shit? There used to be some shit that the guys would drink as like a muscle supplement that would bring the blood to the surface of the capillaries and make you look more muscular but it would also turn you red. I don't know.
I've never been a Bullet Club guy. I know the shirts got popular. I know there were different iterations of the Bullet Club. But I just think even though they worked in New Japan, and even though the Bullet Club was a big deal for a while, Gallows and Anderson I've said it before, they don't bring much to the table. Because they're not going to outwork anyone in the ring. They're not really especially over. And they're being jammed down everyone's throats in this Omega Callis thing.
And now especially Gallows makes everybody else in his company look bad because they look like such fucking midgets.
I thought you were going to say just because he can't work.
No, I mean, but there's a grown man on the screen next to all these, fucking pygmies.
And the Young Bucks
he makes them look bad by standing next to him.
And the Young Bucks just can't figure out what they want to be. They're not that young anymore. Matt Jackson's like in his mid-30s, but he's still like this young guy with angst. What is he so mad about all the fucking time? He's walking around like a little tough guy, and he acts like a heel, but they want to be baby faces. And this whole stupid thing, like you said, it's always driven me nuts. It's one of the reasons why the Bullet Club has always been lame to me, and why for so long, even beyond their work, I thought the Bucks were lame when they were doing the crotch chops and the too sweet. That's someone else's shit. Why don't you just go out there and hold 4 fingers up if you're going to steal someone's shit? It's stupid. It's not yours. What are you trying to be? The whole too sweet thing, enough. You know what?
Enough.
That was legitimately Kevin Nash and Scott Hall and the Clique, Sean Waltman. That was legitimately something they did. And they started doing it on the air. Now all of a sudden, these guys are doing it. There's no history there. It's just, hey, we saw those guys do it. The NWO were cool. We're going to do it too.
The cool wrestlers do this.
Nah, Bullet Club is so overrated. Even with having AJ Styles have that great year in Japan. Even with Finn Balor being really cool with them. If you're an Omega fan, Omega was in the Bullet Club, and that was around the time he had his big moments in Japan. But look at how many shitty members of the Bullet Club there have been, too.
Wait a minute. The WWE got Finn Balor and got oh God, who
AJ.
Got AJ Styles, and AEW got the Young Bucks.
Yeah, so I just Gallows and Anderson, they belong in Impact. Let Impact have them. I'm afraid they're going to leave Impact and start working for AEW full time, and then we'll have to watch their matches more. But not good. Not good at all.
Well, they could come down with that scarlet fever, and then they'd be medically uncleared.
And like you said, Cody has one guy badly punching his shoulder, and boy, Billy Gunn's kids ran in there like they were saving the world.
We got to save death, right?
Yeah.
There's going to be a killing here.
Moxley's and Kingston are getting their asses kicked. No one. Now, I know sometimes that works. Sometimes if it's a heel who is now a babyface, no one wants to save them for good reason.
They don't have any friends.
Why isn't anyone saving Moxley? What does anyone have against Moxley there?
Because he won't dress with him in the locker room. He's not one of the boys. He has to dress out in the parking lot.
They should interview someone, have them give that reason. How come you didn't help John Moxley when he was being attacked viciously by the former Bullet Club members? Well, he thinks he's better than us. He won't dress in the locker room with us. We never see him at catering.
He's like Izzy Mendelbaum. Oh, you think you're better than me? All right, for the Seinfeld folks in the audience. Well, the forecast for the next segment was 100% chance of 74 inches of Sting.
Well, hold on. I want to tell you, just like you said earlier, where you wrote down before the Cody match that it would start off hot and then afterbirth. Same thing here. I right away knew Jake and Lance Archer will be coming out because Sting can't do any promos without someone interfering. It was Team Taz. And then last week it was Jake and Lance Archer, so I knew it would be them again.
But I didn't know it'd be both.
And then, well, I did start thinking in the middle of it, well, Team Taz really isn't doing anything right now, are they? And then, boom, there they are.
So what we see is Tony brings out Sting and Darby Allin. Darby Allin. It's an old folk song. And Darby Allin. Tony asks Darby Allin a question. Immediately, Darby Allin takes the microphone. And Tony, once again, just throws his hand up and steps back. And I hate that. And I'll explain why I hate that again. When do you see it in the octagon? When do you see it at courtside on the NBA? When do you see it field side in the NFL? The interviewer asks the athlete a question and holds the microphone while the athlete answers it. But because all these guys have grown up watching the Attitude Era, when all of wrestling became the South Park episode where they're emoting in the ring with a spotlight on them, he just fucking takes the microphone away from the interviewer. Again, Watts used to talk about that. Dusty used to talk about that. The announcer is in control of the program. There's a structure. There's a hierarchy. Anyway, so Darby speaks like he's been hypnotized as usual, but finally fired up a little bit. And right as he did, here comes Lance Archer and Jake Roberts. Again, they're mad because they didn't get their time. Archer did a pretty good promo, halfway fired up. Jake called Darby Allin a weenie. They're all saying son of a bitch and shit on this show, and Jake calls Darby a weenie. And basically they told Sting and Darby Allin off and they left. And then it's open mic night. Here comes Team Taz from the other way. And by the way, which tube is the heel tube and which tube is the babyface tube? Because I saw Lance Archer and Jake Roberts, clearly heels because they're being mean to the babyfaces, walk through one tube, and through the other tube, here comes Team Taz, clearly heels because they've been mean to the babyfaces. But then Cage jumps up, Brian Cage, Mr. Get My Shit In, and cuts a promo on Sting where he respects Sting. Ricky Starks is wrong about him. The rest of Team Taz goes, what the fuck are you saying? He shoves his way through them and walks off. Now they're breaking up. And they're mad at each other. And through this entire segment, the one person who never spoke a single word is the highest paid guy there. Sting. What was this segment supposed to accomplish besides confusion in the marketplace?
Well, first of all, I love these train wreck segments on AEW. Darby established that he wants to defend the TNT title more regularly. He's only defended it like 3 times, I think he said, which is a bit ridiculous that we're talking about it.
And then he said, I've defended it 3 times, and the people cheered because they thought that was their cheer line. He's like, no, that's bullshit.
Yeah, by the way, Darby, maybe you could defend it a little more if you're not always sitting in the stands brooding.
Brooding. He's very broody.
And then, you know, if they're setting up Archer and Darby, I mean, we'll see. Darby's good.
But that's just a credibility stretch visually, isn't it?
I think if any of the smaller guys can pull something like that off, it's Darby, who lays his shit in.
Okay, true.
And who tends to work a little smarter than everyone else. Jake, his voice is shot.
Wow.
Like you said, the weenie thing. He was dressed like Grizzly. Did you notice that? Under his leather jacket.
Yes.
It was all blue. It was all like that Grizzly outfit from Mid-South.
Grizzly used to dress somewhat like a gas station attendant. But I always gave him the benefit of the doubt, because how do you find clothes that size fashionably?
And then with Team Taz, like you said, I guess Cage is turning babyface. They all walked out there. They didn't know he was going to do this. And then he just grabbed the mic.
He hadn't said a word. He broke the news on national television.
I just want to let you know I respect you because you beat me and my friend and our buddy in the warehouse. By the way, it was a street fight. Why were they in a warehouse? They weren't on the street. If you're going to do a cinematic match, do it on the street.
Why is it that you drive on the parkway, but you park in your driveway? Why is that?
What's going on in AEW? We need answers to these questions. You know, I was thinking, though, if Cage is turning babyface and Team Taz is Taz, who's a great promo.
Yeah.
Ricky Starks, who is a good promo and just really good as a slimy heel. Hook, who we've not seen do anything except get kidnapped, where I think he somehow had his hat on still, even though he was kidnapped, in a bag. Hobbs, who we just haven't seen enough of what he could do. If Cage turns babyface, is that what Team Taz is? I realize how much Team Taz is actually hurt by the idea they wouldn't have Cage there. They need to have someone else in that group.
But besides that, you can't just have multiple people in multiple teams or groups or whatever switching sides weekly. It breeds indifference. And
it's like roller games. It reminds me of roller games.
So Sting can't do 30 seconds of a promo before he just walks out and walks back.
He painted his face for that. How much do you think they're paying him?
They're paying him enough to paint his face. I'll guarantee you that. The next match on this journey through hysteria, Felix with his partner Pac in the corner against Angelico. And instead of Angelico, I wrote, oh, hell no. Next match.
Oh, come on. You know, I saw a clip.
Seriously?
I saw a clip the other day. I've never seen this before. It had to be from a few years ago. I lost it. Because we always joke about Rey Fenix, who's spectacular, but sometimes he either misses his move or he flies too far. We haven't really seen that as a problem. I've seen a lot of guys come up short, but for a guy to go too far, often, that's really talent. I saw a clip from AAA. I don't even remember. He was working with Jeff Jarrett, I think. And Jeff's at ringside, and apparently Antonio Pena's sister, who I believe is the owner and runs AAA, she's a character like Dixie on TV, I assume, based on what I saw here. She gets up from ringside, front row, and throws a drink at Jeff. And while she and Jeff are going back and forth, Rey Fenix runs to the ropes, dives through the ropes, and does that flip he does where he usually ends up going into the stands.
Yeah.
He fucking drop kicked her right in the face. The owner of AAA, he wiped her out, and then she's selling, but she's not selling like it's a work. She's selling because one of the wrestlers just ripped her head off with his foot. Oh my God, I'd never seen this before. And I was like, man, look at that. He just wiped her out.
Well, I wish he'd do some of that shit on this program. I wouldn't mind watching him. But no, I didn't watch this match, and I can't imagine you're going to tell me I should have.
No, it wouldn't have been something you liked.
All right. Moving on, because we're about to get to the main event. Officer Bar Brady was with our friend Bluto and his little buddy Pip Sabian, and there was no Virgin Penelope. She's apparently injured. They were not in the empty lime green room that Moxley and Kingston were in. They were in a glowing red room with exercise equipment in it. Possibly one of those Russian sex clubs you hear so much about. And Bluto's doing chin-ups. And basically, he's talking about wanting Chucklefuck Taylor back for a lifetime butlership, but Pip is still upset because they ruined his wedding, and they bicker. Pip and Bluto are bickering now, and Bluto tells him that the worst thing for his career is having his wife at ringside. This may have been taped before he found out the real worst thing for your career is try to fuck with Jim Cornette on Twitter, but so now they're bickering with each other, but then Bluto says they're still buds outside the ring. And they accept a tag team match versus Pockets and Chucklefuck, which I believe that's the one supposed to have the video games around the ring or whatever. That's what they've been bandying about.
Yeah.
And so that's official now. So we got that going for us.
Well, it looks like the I Married for a Green Card Express is going to be breaking up pretty soon. You know, Miro, I've said it before, despite him being clearly dumb as a brick, he is someone who has shown potential in his career. Now, he's in his mid to late 30s, so time is running out, and certainly his time has not been used wisely in AEW. And he's one of these guys that you look at and say, wow, he could have been brought in a completely different fashion, and it would have been so much better than this. Tell me if anyone actually cares about Kip Sabian. Seriously.
How would they?
Exactly. Originally, I think he was a babyface, because remember, someone reminded me of this the other day. He's the one who had like almost a 20-minute match with Adam Page early on, where it was like, why can't Adam Page beat this guy? And it just went on and on and on. No one has cared about him. They eventually did do the thing with him and Jelly, because he took Jelly's girl in real life, and no one really cared about that. No one has cared about anything this guy has done. He's not especially good in the ring. What's the point?
He looks like he's 12.
What's the point of this guy? This guy just doesn't have it.
Because they are video game friends, and they're friends. And they're all friends. Let's talk about the main event.
Yes.
Lights out match. Falls count anywhere. No disqualification. Anything goes. Lazy booking. When I heard that the women's match was going to take center stage and be the main event, I knew already before you called me that I should watch it. So I never intended to invoke the tooth and nail rule on this match. Because it is a women's main event, and it was an historic moment for AEW, so I wanted to watch it. And boy, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I never dreamed, and I don't know why I didn't see this coming all the way down the road. I never dreamed that they would make the women's match falls count anywhere, no DQ, anything goes, lazy booking garbage. But I was wrong. Let me say this at the outset. Both girls did a phenomenal job doing what they did. They took it seriously. They did their best. They worked hard. They bled. They took outrageous bumps. Wonderful job. Let me also say this at the outset. This was a crime against nature and should never have been allowed to fucking happen. That anybody would allow these two girls to go out and do that shit if they wanted to, much less book them to do it, is ridiculous. And it proved a point. There is no sexism in wrestling because male or female, garbage wrestling is garbage wrestling, regardless of who's doing it. It's still the shits. It's still stupid. It's still bad for the business. It's still egregiously low-class sideshow circus bullshit. Before we talk about the actual match, before anybody says, oh, Cornette hates the women, doesn't want the women to main event, what was my favorite match on WrestleMania last year?
Rhea Ripley versus Charlotte.
Exactly. By far the best match, the best thing on WrestleMania. The biggest company's biggest show. Why? Because that was one of the first empty arena shows right after the pandemic had hit. And instead of, as we found out, as anybody who's tried to do it already knows, angle fights and backstage bullshit of fights in empty arenas are death. And most grudge match, brawl type of matches in a completely empty arena are death. But those girls worked a contest. They worked an athletic competition with the sounds, and you could hear them hitting, and you could hear them grunting and squealing and screaming. But it wasn't stupid. It wasn't silly. Here's the difference. The difference is they talk about wanting a women's movement and wanting to respect them equally to the men. Well, if you watch Charlotte against Rhea Ripley at WrestleMania, you could respect them as athletes, even if you knew wrestling was a work. They looked like stars, and they were on a big budget program, and it was professional, and you could respect it, even if you weren't a wrestling fan. If you were a potential sponsor for a program, business that might want to sponsor a big TV show like that, you could look at that and say, well, I don't like wrestling, but God, those girls are athletes, they're attractive, and they're professional. Look at this budget. If a young girl, because now so many of these young girls are supposed to be looking up to their role models, right? And wanting to get in the business. So if a young girl wanted to be a wrestler and their parents, male or female, either one, were sitting in the room and watching Charlotte and Rhea Ripley at WrestleMania, same thing. Well, yeah, it's showbiz and it's fake. But gosh, they're athletes and they're making a lot of money, obviously. And look how costumed they are and the spectacle and the pageantry of this show. Well, our little Kathy probably will never be an athlete like that, but we could encourage her to do something like that. That wouldn't be the worst thing our daughter could do. You would want to sponsor it. You wouldn't freak out if your daughter said, I'd like to do that. If you look at that and you say, this is a positive image of professional wrestling, whether it's a work or not. This, you think anybody wants to sponsor a show where there's a bunch of indie garbage, bad outlaw wrestling going on with bloody women rolling around in fucking thumbtacks? You think any parents would want their daughters to do that? You think that the guys sitting back in the locker room, if they had half a lick of sense, they were back there applauding them, they should be going, what the fuck? And they'd be going and slapping Tony Khan around the face and say, if you ever let the fucking girls do shit like this again, we'll all walk out. Because what have they got to do now? If a 120-pound girl can take a Death Valley driver off the top rope onto a fucking ladder and get covered and kick out after a 2 count, you need to take a goddamn battleship and flatten a fucking 275-pound man. It's making their job harder. It immunes the fans because let's face it, I'm sorry, but this may be sexist, but it is also the stone cold fact. Thunder Rosa versus Britt Baker will never headline a goddamn pay-per-view event that draws a legitimate amount of money. But guys in a grudge match, been heavily built up to, might. And they might want to use some of those goddamn bumps or moves. I was not upset about the women getting juice and bleeding in a vacuum. I was not upset about that concept. But the way that it was done, let's talk about the way it was done, and then let's talk about the way they could have done it. They have this match, falls count anywhere, no DQ, anything goes, lights out, lazy booking. They can't just let these girls have a match. Thunder Rosa and Serena Deeb, the best two fucking women they've got on their roster, that have had excellent matches every time they go out, despite what opponents they might be given. I know Serena's injured now, but Thunder Rosa is phenomenal as an athlete. She could have led Britt Baker to the best match that Britt Baker's ever had, because she has come along as a worker and she's a good athlete. And they could have done something that might make women's wrestling look positive. But instead, they do the same shit the guys do that make wrestling look negative. Before the bell, Reba hits Thunder Rosa over the back with a crutch, and she has a fight with her, but Britt Baker blindsides her, and they do a big finish on the stage, the Rico Constantino's old finish when he was in OVW. She dropped her, boom, 1-2 on a 2 count, a bump on the stage in the first 15 seconds. And then immediately Britt Baker's got a chair. And Britt Baker beats Thunder Rosa with a chair. And then Thunder Rosa wears Britt Baker out with a chair. At that point, this early in the match, I had to pause it and walk off on it, because if I was going to watch the whole thing, I needed a minute. Then they go over the rail and they fight in the arena, and they do spots with chairs where they're leaping off the chairs or leaping onto the chairs. Britt Baker and Reba set up a table at ringside and leave it there. They leave it there for later. They set it up for no reason. They leave the fight they're in, go out, set up a piece of furniture, and do nothing with it. Leave it there for later. And then, as a matter of fact, Britt tossed 4 or 5 chairs in the ring while Thunder Rosa was laying around waiting and getting her juice over on the corner. But then she had to lay there and settle on the steps forever while they filled up the ring with all these chairs. I know somebody told him, hey, go out and make some distraction while the girl's getting juice, but Jesus Christ. So now we've got 4 chairs, 5 chairs in the ring. They've already used a crutch, and they've already fought in the arena. Now they go to the break. They come back. Britt Baker gives Thunder Rosa a superplex off the top rope onto the 5 chairs, 2 count. This is fucking ridiculous. Ludicrous. If guys did it, it would be equally as stupid. Then Reba pulls a ladder out from under the ring. Thunder Rosa kicks the ladder into Britt Baker's face, and she gets juice after a while. In all the middle of all this stupid, Thunder Rosa has great babyface fire and wonderful facials and good body language. Then Thunder Rosa pulls out a table and sets it up and lets it sit and goes back in the ring. It's every bad indie match that's ever been had. Then Thunder Rosa does the DVD, a Death Valley Driver off the top rope onto the ladder on Britt Baker, 2 count. Then Britt Baker DDTs Thunder Rosa on a chair and then hit the ropes and curb stomped her face first on the chair, got a 2 count. And then Reba hands Britt Baker a bag in, and Britt's got great juice. Thunder Rosa's was a little limits. They're both bleeding, blah, blah, blah. Reba hands Britt Baker a bag, and Britt Baker pours 1,000,000 thumbtacks out of the bag. And I'm out. That was it. I couldn't take any more, and I'm done. What happened from there?
I didn't write down spot for spot what happened, but...
Who won? Who cares?
Thunder Rosa won.
What'd she win with, a double-barreled shotgun or a fucking sledgehammer?
I agree. Look, I was able to lose myself in the match. Even though there's a lot of shit I really hated, I hated the thumbtacks. And as soon as I saw that, I said, Jim is going to really hate this. But other than the thumbtacks, I was able to lose myself in the match and enjoy it. especially with the spectacle of all the blood on Britt Baker, because it kept coming. It was nonstop. I agree with all the points you made about the stupidity of, and it's not.
Well, here's another point. The blood was the shocking part, right? Women bleeding, double juice girls match. When's the last time you saw that? So why did they have to take every hat out of the hat store and put it on top of this hat of a match?
I don't even understand why they had this match for this feud. How did we get to the level where they needed a lights out, no DQ match? How did we get here?
I'll tell you exactly, because Tony Khan or somebody gave him the idea, or they came up with the idea, we'll have a double juice girls match. And of course, since he's a mark and he's not in charge, and he doesn't know how to say no or when to say no, he let him do it.
I bet you it was his idea.
Oh, and it could be, and very well, then it's okay, I'm going to have a double juice girls match. It's like having a fucking stadium that needs a match rather than a match that needs a stadium. You've decided what you're going to do, and then you put two people in it that can do it. That doesn't mean that it makes any sense. But the point is, why would anybody want to watch two men, let alone two women, roll around bloody in thumbtacks? It's fucking stupid. Male or female, there's no sport or legitimacy or display of talent or anything else about the garbage matches. And all it does is make the business look bad and make it look like a goddamn sideshow. And they could have really done something positive for the women and let them get over by giving them a main event match and letting them have a match and show what they have in the way of talent instead of hitting each other with blunt shit and being stuntmen doing tricks. And you can still do a double juice women's match. That's another thing. That's why Dana White never wanted a women's match or a women's division in the UFC, because he didn't want the sponsors to see girls having a bloody fight until along came somebody who could draw him a ton of money on pay-per-view, and then he relented. But still, they would never do something like this because they want mainstream acceptance. They want legitimacy. They want people to respect what they do. We used to also in this business somewhat. We wanted to make money first, but we wanted people to have a positive image of it instead of this goddamn circus, sideshow, sewage business. And so besides that, you could still do it. Start having a match. Start having an athletic, professional wrestling match between two women. And then suddenly Thunder Rosa gets kicked off or out of a move or misses a charge or whatever, and she hits the post. Head first, boom, and she goes down, and now she comes up bleeding. And it's accidental, allegedly. And Britt Baker can look and be shocked, but then she turns into the heel because now she starts working on the cut. She's not putting her through tables and suplexing her off the top rope. She's working on an injury and being a fucking vicious heel doing it. And let Thunder Rosa with those facials and that fire sell. And Britt Baker waltzes her across Texas. And then maybe finally she makes a mistake, and then Thunder Rosa starts the comeback, and now she's got the fire and the blood in her face. And now Britt Baker's backing up and backpedaling and begging off, and she's bumping Britt Baker everywhere. And finally Reba tries to do something with a chair, and goddamn, boom, Thunder Rosa pickles her, and the referee's shoveling Reba out of the fucking ring. And Thunder Rosa picks that chair up and looks at her, Britt Baker, and says, "You bitch, you busted me open." One shot with a fucking chair, boom. And down goes Britt Baker, and she comes up bloody. And now it's happening naturally. It looks like a contest. It's not a bunch of furniture stunts. It's not a bunch of garbage that people are cooperating with each other to hurt each other on purpose and roll around in sharp shit to appeal to the lowest common denominator of the audience. You've got a women's athletic contest that has gotten control has been lost in a controlled fashion. And these girls are bleeding. Now, whichever one you want to go over, you put them over in a fucking finish. But you've had a 15 or 20 minute main event match. You've had your double juice, but it wasn't done egregiously or in poor taste. It looked like it happened organically and part of the fucking contest. And you haven't put a hat on a hat. And you also haven't killed every finish for every man in the company henceforth that couldn't sell anything after these girls bore up under all of this.
Nobody sells anything anyway.
But I'm just saying there's a difference between girls bleeding in what is presented as a contest where the blood is an unfortunate and or accidental byproduct of the overall thing, and two girls obviously doing cooperative stage shit, because you can't do this furniture bullshit and make it look real. Obviously doing cooperative fake shit, choreographed to go through furniture and hit each other with shit and bleed on purpose with no pretense of a contest, just doing fucking, wrestling porn for the weakest minded individuals out there that like that kind of deathmatch bullshit. That's what I'm not upset that I'm upset that it's men or women doing these matches. And it's especially stupid to have the women doing it. And it's especially stupid when the other fucking company has highly trained women that look like stars and work like stars and perform like stars, and they give them that opportunity. And this fucking company gets a chance to answer that, and they have a garbage, independent, outlaw death match between two girls where they're obviously aiding each other in all of this, and it's just a freak show. This, to me, was almost as distasteful as when they brought that fucking Judas Messias, a Mexican guy from AAA, wherever he was working, into TNA, and he came through the ring and attacked Abyss, broke a bottle, and was taking the broken glass and ripping it down Abyss's arm, and Abyss was blading his arm because Abyss is a wonderful guy and I like him, but he's a goddamn complete idiot with that fucking hardcore bullshit. Thumbtacks and blading your arm and shit. And all I could sit there and do it, watching the monitor, all I could think was, Spike is going to see this and kick us off the air. Because everybody watching this knows that this is phony, but they also know that the cuts are real, which means they know he's cutting himself. Which means, what the fuck? Why would you ever watch that show again where the guy is obviously slicing his arm up instead of being ripped up with broken glass? Because they're so goddamn stupid, they can't figure out a way to get personalities over and have wrestling matches and draw money with them. And it's the same kind of shit. And I'm about fed up with it. That's what I thought about that match. They lost their chance to be taken seriously as professional athletes, and now we know that Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa are just as good as having garbage matches that require no talent as all the guys are. That's what they accomplished there.
I thought they were better.
Changed my mind.
I enjoyed this match as a garbage match better than the last few we've seen from other people on the roster.
Well, that's true. They did a better job of having a garbage match in bad taste than anybody else in the company.
I hate thumbtacks. I hate when they turn the lights out. I hate the handcuffs. Each week I get to talk about things I hate that we see way too often. The bag of thumbtacks.
I'll watch the handcuffs, but thumbtacks, I don't care who does it. Jerry Lawler pulls out, like Jerry Lawler would have ever pulled out thumbtacks in his match. But if Jerry Lawler pulls out thumbtacks in his match, I'm done.
Lawler would have used push pins. But no, look, I was able to lose myself in the match and enjoy it, other than the thumbtacks. That was the one spot that I groaned. I was just like, ugh, this is so unnecessary. I've had a thumbtack go into my knee. It wasn't that big a deal. So don't show me like, my God, it's thumbtacks. Oh my God, how will they ever deal with it?
And of course, 45 of them in your back aren't any fun, but that's what makes anybody watching that say, well, these are just stupid, stupid people. Just very stupid people. Because falling in thumbtacks or throwing someone in thumbtacks is not going to win you the match. It's not going to beat anybody. It's just stupid freak show bullshit from these basement dwelling nerds. Have you seen now stepping on Legos is a thing they're doing in death matches on the Outlaws? Because everybody knows how painful it is to step on a Lego. It's become wrestling for bloodthirsty, low-class, unsavory children under the age of 14, whether physically or mentally, is what we've come to here.
And like you kind of said earlier, I thought, despite what the match was, and I didn't mind it as much as you did, Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa did a great job.
Yes, I can't fault their effort or their execution. I can only fault them ever being allowed to do this in the first place.
I think a lot of this is bad booking. Like I said, they've had a feud. They're attacking each other. They're, pouring water on her face paint, whatever's going on. It seems like it went to a lights out, no DQ match pretty quickly.
Well, that escalated quickly. But you know what? And here's the thing. Maybe did you see they also, I'll say this, we're going to stop talking about this fucking television program, but they released backstage footage of everybody being led by Tony Khan himself coming up and applauding the girls when they came back and telling them what a great job they did in their performance. Because it's all fake. They're applauding the effort that the girls put in and having that fake match. Because if that was a real fight, would you be applauding or would you be calling an ambulance for these girls and concerned about their health? But no, they applaud them. They tell them how great they all did. Then they take them to the back, and there's the footage of Britt Baker while being attended to by the doctor, asking if they think Meltzer will give this 5 stars because that's what she was going for. And folks, that's what's wrong with wrestling today too.
And he didn't.
Well, God damn it. Talk about a kick in the fucking cunt. Boy, he just fucking... he didn't even give them 5 stars after they went through all that. He gives everybody else all this shit.
I believe, I don't have the Observer in front of me.
Their match was better than anything Twinkle Toes does. He didn't give that 5 stars.
I believe it got 4 and maybe either 4.5 or 4 3/4.
Wow, just because she asked for it, probably. That's why he couldn't give it to her. Well, the whole thing, remember, was that a question on the drive-thru last week? Did the wrestlers of the 80s ever wonder whether they were going to get 5 stars or not? And I fucking blew snot laughing. Said they wouldn't know if afterwards, if they got 5 stars, they wouldn't be aware of it. Wrestling for children, by children, to get the praise that they somehow don't get in their empty lives.
Do you want the ratings?
Sure.
NXT, 597. AEW
745.
768.
No, I was off by 23. So in other words, nothing's changed.
No growth.
They can have the second coming of Carl Gotch and George Hackenschmidt or 2 drunks in an alley fighting, and it'll be the same basic numbers from week to week on either program.
It sure does seem that way, doesn't it?
Your closing thoughts. I got to get off. I got to get out of here. I've got to go take a shower after watching that girls match with thumbtacks. If this fast lane thing is happening, we'll talk about that on the drive-thru next week is what we're saying. This coming week?
That's
coming Monday?
I think so, yes.
Tuesday? This coming Tuesday on the drive-thru, we'll talk about fast lane, which occurred on Sunday. And then next week on the experience here, we'll talk about my nervous breakdown I'm about to have. Closing thoughts.
I don't have any closing thoughts this week.
Good.
I've exhausted my thoughts.
I like them that way. I like them good and exhausted. Folks, until next week or the drive-thru or the cameo or wherever we see you, thank you, fuck you, and bye-bye, everybody.